The contract was signed. The date was set. Evelyn Harrow had 48 hours before she became property. Not a wife, property. She'd made peace with that distinction 3 weeks ago when the creditors started appearing at dawn, when her mother stopped eating, when her father locked himself in his study with a pistol she pretended not to know about. Marriage wasn't supposed to be about love. It was a business merger, and she was the primary asset being liquidated. But standing in the marble entrance of Blackthornne Manor, watching a man with storm-gray eyes study her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve, Evelyn felt the first crack in her carefully constructed armor. This wasn't supposed to happen. If you want to see how far this story of calculated survival and dangerous choices travels, drop a comment with your city below. Hit that like button. You won't believe where this ends. The carriage ride to Blackthornne Manor had taken 6 hours, and Evelyn had spent every minute of it rehearsing her performance. Smile demurely. Laugh at Lord Pemberton's jokes, even the cruel ones. Never contradict him in public. Keep her posture perfect, her opinions invisible, her ambitions buried so deep they'd never surface to embarrass him. She'd memorized the rules like an actress learning her lines, because that's exactly what this was. A performance that would run for the rest of her life. "You look ill," her mother said from across the carriage, not unkindly. Margaret Harrow had once been beautiful. Now she just looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that lived in the bones. "Perhaps some powder before we arrive?" "I'm fine. You're pale." "I said I'm fine." Her mother flinched, and Evelyn immediately regretted the sharpness in her voice. None of this was Margaret's fault. The gambling debts, the failed investments, the string of catastrophically bad decisions that had reduced the Harrow family from comfortable gentry to borderline destitute. Those belonged to her father. Her mother had simply married the wrong man 30 years ago, and now her daughter was about to make the same mistake deliberately. Except Evelyn didn't consider it a mistake. She considered it math. Lord Edmund Pemberton was 63 years old, suffered from gout, and had buried 2 wives already. He was also obscenely wealthy, had no living children to complicate inheritance, and seemed to view marriage as a slightly more permanent version of hiring household staff. Their courtship, if you could call it that, had consisted of 3 supervised visits where he'd examined her teeth, asked about her health history, and made it clear that her primary duties would be hosting dinner parties and staying out of his business affairs. It was, by Evelyn's assessment, the best offer she was going to get. "The Duke's estate is quite grand," her mother tried again, clearly attempting to lighten the mood. "They say he's hosting over 50 guests this week, all the best families. How fortunate for them." "Evelyn." "What?" She met her mother's gaze. "Would you prefer I pretend to be excited?" "We both know why we're here. Lord Pemberton wants me to meet his colleagues, prove I can navigate society without embarrassing him. I smile, I curtsy, I demonstrate I'm adequately trained, and in 2 weeks I become Lady Pemberton. It's a transaction, Mother. Let's not dress it up as something it isn't." Margaret's eyes glistened, but she didn't argue. How could she? Every word Evelyn had spoken was true. The carriage lurched to a stop, and through the window Blackthornne Manor rose like something out of a Gothic novel. All dark stone and towering spires, beautiful in a severe, uncompromising way. Servants in immaculate livery materialized to handle the luggage. The door opened, and Evelyn stepped out into autumn sunlight that felt too bright, too cheerful for the occasion. "Miss Harrow, Mrs. Harrow, welcome." The butler was tall, rail-thin, and spoke with the kind of precision that suggested he found most people intellectually lacking. "His Grace has asked that you be shown to your rooms immediately. Dinner is at 8. The Duke requests evening dress." Of course he did. Everything about this place screamed old money and older expectations. Their rooms, plural, thank God, were on the 3rd floor, connected by a shared sitting area. Evelyn's chamber was beautiful in an impersonal way, decorated in pale blues and cream, with a 4-poster bed that could have slept an entire family. She walked to the window and looked out over manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than her father's annual income used to be. Somewhere in this house was Lord Pemberton. Somewhere in this house was her future. She should have felt resigned. Instead, she felt trapped. "Get it together," she whispered to her reflection in the glass. 2 weeks. You can survive anything for 2 weeks. Dinner was a production. The dining room could have hosted a small army, the table laden with enough silver to fund a modest estate. Evelyn counted 32 guests, all dressed in their finest, all performing the same elaborate social dance she'd been rehearsing. Lord Pemberton was seated near the head of the table, looking exactly as old and disinterested as she remembered. He'd acknowledged her arrival with a brief nod, then returned to his conversation about livestock prices. Evelyn had been placed between a vapid young woman who wouldn't stop talking about her upcoming wedding and a middle-aged gentleman who kept staring at her chest. She smiled through both, ate almost nothing, and tried to calculate exactly how many of these dinners she'd have to endure over the next 40 years. The number was depressing. "You seem distracted." The voice came from across the table, and Evelyn looked up to find a man watching her with unsettling focus. He was younger than most of the guests, mid-30s perhaps, with dark hair, sharp features, and those strange gray eyes that seemed to see through social pretense like it was made of glass. "I'm sorry," she said politely. "Distracted," he repeated. "You've been pushing that same piece of fish around your plate for 10 minutes. Either you're contemplating its philosophical implications, or your mind is elsewhere." Several nearby guests turned to listen. Evelyn felt her mother tense from 3 seats down. "I wasn't aware my eating habits were of general interest," she replied, keeping her tone light, harmless. "They're not, but you are." The directness of it caught her off guard. Most men, especially men of his obvious station, didn't acknowledge women so bluntly. They circled, they implied, they operated in innuendo and plausible deniability. "I'm flattered," she said, deploying her practiced smile, "though I'm afraid I'm rather ordinary." "No, you're not." "I beg your pardon?" He leaned back in his chair, still watching her with that unnerving intensity. Ordinary women don't look like they're attending their own execution. They especially don't do it with such remarkable composure. The table had gone quiet. Evelyn felt her face flush, but years of training kept her expression neutral. This was a test. Everything was always a test. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," she said. "Don't you?" "Adrian." The reprimand came from the head of the table, where an older woman with diamonds at her throat was frowning. "Mind your manners." "Of course, Aunt Beatrice." He inclined his head, but his eyes never left Evelyn's face. "My apologies, Miss Harrow. I've been told I have a terrible habit of saying what everyone else is thinking." "Then perhaps," Evelyn replied, finding her footing, "you should consider thinking different things." Someone laughed. The tension broke. Conversation resumed. But Adrian, whoever he was, continued to watch her for the rest of the meal, and Evelyn found herself fighting the urge to squirm under his scrutiny. "That was the Duke of Blackthorne," her mother hissed the moment they were alone. "Adrian Blackthorne. This is his estate. How could you speak to him that way?" Evelyn stared at her. "That was the Duke? You didn't know?" "No one told me." She pressed her hands to her temples. "I thought he was just another guest. Why would the Duke of Blackthorne be interested in my fish?" "I don't know, but you embarrassed yourself. You embarrassed us. He started it. Evelyn." Her mother's voice went hard. "You cannot afford these mistakes. Lord Pemberton is watching. Everyone is watching. Your entire future depends on the next 2 weeks, and you're arguing with one of the most powerful men in England about dinner conversation?" She was right. Of course she was right. Evelyn took a breath, forced herself to calm down. "It won't happen again. See that it doesn't." But as her mother left, Evelyn couldn't shake the memory of those gray eyes, or the way Adrian Blackthorne had looked at her, not with desire, not with dismissal, but with recognition. Like he'd seen something she'd been trying very hard to hide. It made her deeply uncomfortable. It also made her curious. The next morning brought a shooting party. Evelyn didn't shoot. Ladies weren't supposed to, though she'd learned in secret as a girl and was a better shot than half the men here. Instead, she joined the other women for a garden walk, listening to endless chatter about servants and fashion and whose daughter was marrying whom. "Such a lovely morning," gushed Lady Caroline, a woman whose primary accomplishment seemed to be having opinions about things that didn't matter. "Though I must say, the Duke seems in unusual spirits." "How so?" someone asked. "He's actually participating. Usually Adrian just observes these gatherings like we're specimens in a jar. But today he's been positively sociable. Evelyn told herself she didn't care. Perhaps he's finally considering marriage, another woman suggested hopefully. He's what, 36? And still no heir. His aunt must be desperate. I heard he was engaged once, years ago. What happened? She died. Carriage accident? I think. Terribly tragic. The conversation moved on, but Evelyn found herself thinking about it. A man who'd lost someone he loved? Was that why he seemed so removed, so willing to say things polite society usually left unsaid? Miss Harrow. She turned to find the Duke himself standing a few feet away, apparently having materialized out of thin air. The other women immediately clustered closer, like flowers turning toward the sun. Your Grace, Evelyn said, curtsying. Would you walk with me? It wasn't really a request, and she couldn't refuse without causing a scene. Of course. They left the chattering group behind, following a gravel path toward a fountain surrounded by late-blooming roses. Evelyn kept her posture perfect, her hands folded, waiting for him to speak first. You're afraid of me, he said finally. I'm not. Please don't lie. You're already pretending to be someone you're not. At least do me the courtesy of honesty in private. She stopped walking. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. He turned to face her, and there was that look again, seeing through her, past her carefully constructed facade. Last night at dinner, for approximately 30 seconds, I saw the real Evelyn Harrow. She was sharp, quick, and angry. Then she disappeared, replaced by this perfect, empty version who says all the right things and feels nothing. Her heart was pounding. You're mistaken. Am I? Tell me. Miss Harrow, do you want to marry Lord Pemberton? That's none of your concern. It is if you're doing it here, under my roof, at a gathering I'm hosting. Then I'm sure you'll be relieved to know the answer is yes. I want to marry him very much. Adrian smiled, but it wasn't pleasant. You're a terrible liar. And you're incredibly presumptuous. Probably, but I'm also right. He started walking again, forcing her to follow or be left standing alone. Let me guess. Your family has money troubles. Not scandalous ones, or you wouldn't be here, but serious enough that you need a solution. Pemberton is old, rich, and unlikely to burden you with romance or children. You've calculated that a few years of managed misery is worth financial security. Does that sum it up? Evelyn felt like she'd been stripped naked in public. How dare you? So I'm right. My reasons are my own. Are they? Or did someone else decide this for you? No one decided anything. I chose this. She'd raised her voice. Two servants pruning nearby rose bushes were pretending not to listen. Evelyn forced herself to breathe, to remember where she was, who she was supposed to be. I chose this, she repeated, quieter now, and I don't appreciate being interrogated about it by someone who doesn't know me. You're right. I don't know you. Adrian's voice had softened too. But I know what settling looks like. I know what fear looks like when it's been dressed up as pragmatism. And I know that women like you, smart, capable women who could be so much more, are taught to believe survival is the same thing as living. It is when survival is all you can afford. Is it really? Or is that just easier to accept than the alternative? What alternative? The words came out harsh. Please, enlighten me. What grand future am I supposed to choose instead? Love? Passion? Those are luxuries for people who don't have creditors at their door. Those are fairy tales, and I stopped believing in fairy tales the day I understood exactly how much my father had gambled away. She was shaking now, and she hated it. Hated that this man, this stranger, had pulled honesty out of her when she'd spent months building walls to keep it contained. Adrian studied her for a long moment. I'm sorry, he said finally. For whatever it's worth. It's worth nothing. Sorry doesn't pay debts. No, but it's still true. He walked away then, leaving her standing alone by the fountain, feeling more exposed than she had in years. That night, Evelyn lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. She told herself Adrian Blackthornne was arrogant, intrusive, and completely out of line. She told herself his opinion didn't matter, that he knew nothing about her situation, that he had no right to judge choices he'd never have to make. She told herself a lot of things, None of them explained why his words kept echoing in her head. Women who could be so much more. Is that just easier to accept than the alternative? She rolled over, punched her pillow, and tried to force herself to sleep. 2 weeks. She just had to survive 2 weeks, and then she'd be Lady Pemberton, and none of this would matter anymore. Except somewhere, deep in a place she refused to acknowledge, Evelyn was starting to wonder if Adrian Blackthorne was right about more than just her terrible lying. The third day of the house party brought an unexpected complication. Lord Pemberton wanted to see her. He's requested a private audience in the West Library at 2 o'clock, her mother said, clearly thrilled. This is excellent news, Evelyn. He wouldn't ask for privacy unless he planned to formalize the arrangement. Translation, he was going to propose. Officially. With witnesses and announcements and all the social machinery that would make backing out nearly impossible, Evelyn should have been relieved. Instead, she felt sick. She arrived at the library precisely on time, wearing her best day dress and a smile that felt like it might crack her face in half. Lord Pemberton was standing by the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking every one of his 63 years. Miss Harrow, punctual, good. My lord, sit. She sat. He didn't. I've been observing you these past days, he said without preamble. Your manners are acceptable. Your appearance is adequate. You don't talk excessively, which is a rare quality in young women. Evelyn kept smiling. Thank you. My first wife was beautiful but stupid. My second was intelligent but shrill. You appear to be neither, which is all I require. He paused. I'm prepared to offer you the protection of my name and the security of my estate. In return, I expect obedience, discretion, and heirs, should your health permit. Romance wasn't dead. It had just been murdered and buried in the garden. I'm honored, Evelyn managed. Are you? He turned to look at her for the first time. You don't seem honored. You seem terrified. Her practiced composure slipped. I'm not. Spare me. I'm old, not blind. He walked closer, studying her with the same clinical detachment he might give a horse he was considering purchasing. Let me be clear, Miss Harrow. I don't expect love. I don't even particularly want affection. What I want is a wife who can manage a household, represent my interest, and not create scandals. If you can do those things, we'll get along fine. If you can't, we won't. But you'll still be considerably better off than you are now. It was the most honest proposal she'd ever heard. It was also the most depressing. I understand, she said. Do you accept? This was it. The moment she'd been preparing for. The practical choice, the safe choice, the only choice. Say yes. Say yes, and everything gets easier. The library door opened. Edmund, forgive the interruption, but your steward needs... Oh. Adrian Blackthorne stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene with those two sharp eyes. I'm interrupting. You are, Pemberton said irritably. What does Richards want? Something about the livestock contracts. He says it's urgent. Pemberton sighed heavily. Everything is always urgent. Miss Harrow, we'll continue this discussion later. Don't go anywhere. He left, and suddenly Evelyn was alone in the library with the Duke of Blackthorne. That looked like a proposal, Adrian said mildly. It was none of your business. Probably not. What did you say? I didn't get a chance to say anything, thanks to your timely interruption. Was it timely? He moved further into the room, closing the door behind him. Or inconvenient? I don't know what you want from me, Evelyn said, standing up. Her hands were shaking. You've made your opinion clear. You think I'm making a mistake. Noted. But it's my mistake to make. Is it really a mistake if you're being forced into it? No one is forcing me. Aren't they? Adrian's voice was quiet, but it cut through her defenses like a blade. Your father's debts are forcing you. Your mother's expectations are forcing you. Society's rules about what women can and cannot do are forcing you. The only person not forcing you is you, and that's the problem. You think I want this? The words burst out before she could stop them. You think I enjoy being paraded around like merchandise? You think I'm thrilled about spending the next 20 years married to a man who just compared me to his dead wives like I'm a piece of furniture he's upgrading? No, I think you're terrified. and I think you've convinced yourself that terror is the same thing as acceptance. What else am I supposed to do?" She was shouting now, didn't care who heard. "Tell me, what magical alternative exists where I don't marry for money, where my family doesn't lose everything, where I get to choose something other than survival? Because I would love to hear it." Adrian didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was different, softer, almost careful. "What if I told you there was another option?" "There isn't." "What if there was?" "Then I'd say you're either naive or cruel, because hope is worse than resignation. Hope makes you think things could be different, and then when they're not, it destroys you." She turned away, pressing her palms against the cool surface of a bookshelf, trying to get herself under control. This was insane. She was arguing with a duke, the duke, in his own library, saying things she'd never said aloud, feeling things she'd promised herself she wouldn't feel. "I should go," she said. "Evelyn, don't call me that. It's your name. You don't have permission to use it." She headed for the door, but Adrian moved to block her path. Not threateningly, he didn't touch her, didn't crowd her, but enough to make her stop. "1 week," he said. "What?" "Give me 1 week. Don't accept Pemberton's proposal yet. Just wait." "Why would I do that?" "Because I'm asking you to. That's not a reason." "Then do it because you're curious. Do it because some part of you, buried deep under all that carefully constructed resignation, wants to know if there's more to life than this." His eyes searched hers. "Do it because you're brave enough to be afraid." Evelyn laughed, but it came out bitter. "You don't know me at all." "Maybe not, but I know courage when I see it, and every day you put on that mask and pretend to be fine when you're breaking apart. That's courage. Misdirected, maybe, but real." He stepped back, giving her space. 1 week, Evelyn, that's all I'm asking." She should say no. Should walk out of this library, find Lord Pemberton, and accept his proposal before she lost her nerve entirely. But Adrian Blackthornne was looking at her like she mattered, not as a solution to someone else's problem, not as a status symbol or a commodity, but as a person whose choices had value beyond their practical outcomes. And it had been so long since anyone had looked at her that way. 1 week, she heard herself say. "But then I'm doing what I came here to do, and I don't want to hear another word about it." Agreed. She left before she could change her mind, her heart hammering against her ribs. Back in her room, Evelyn stared at her reflection and tried to understand what she'd just done. She'd agreed to delay her engagement, the one thing standing between her family and complete ruin, because a man she barely knew had asked her to. It was irrational, dangerous, possibly the stupidest decision she'd ever made. But as she looked at herself in the mirror, Evelyn realized something unsettling. For the first time in months, she didn't look quite so much like she was attending her own funeral. She looked, just barely, like someone who might still believe things could be different, and that terrified her more than anything else. The week Adrian had asked for became a battlefield. Not the obvious kind, with raised voices and slammed doors, but the quieter, more insidious sort where every conversation felt like a chess match, and Evelyn could never quite tell if she was winning or losing. Lord Pemberton was growing impatient. Her mother was growing suspicious. And Adrian Blackthornne was everywhere, inserting himself into moments that should have been private, disrupting plans that should have been simple, watching her with those gray eyes that made her feel like a book he was determined to finish. "You're avoiding me," he said on the 4th morning, materializing beside her during breakfast as if summoned by her thoughts. Evelyn didn't look up from her toast. "I'm eating." "You're hiding behind a piece of bread. It's very good bread." "Evelyn, Your Grace." She set down her knife with deliberate precision. "I agreed to wait 1 week. I didn't agree to spend that week being interrogated at every meal." "I'm not interrogating you. I'm attempting conversation." Those feel remarkably similar. Around them, the breakfast room hummed with polite morning chatter. Lady Caroline was describing a hat she'd seen in London. 2 elderly gentlemen were arguing about parliamentary reform. No one was paying attention to them, but Evelyn felt exposed anyway, like everyone could see the cracks forming in her carefully maintained facade. Adrian lowered his voice. "Walk with me." "I'm not finished eating." "Yes, you are. You've been pushing that same egg around your plate for 10 minutes. You're very concerned with my eating habits. I'm concerned with you avoiding me. Maybe I simply don't enjoy your company. Liar. The word was soft, almost teasing, but it hit harder than it should have. Because he was right. She didn't dislike his company. That was the problem. Every conversation with Adrian felt dangerous. Not because he was cruel or inappropriate, but because he made her think about things she'd spent months trying not to think about. He made her question decisions she'd already made. He made her want things she couldn't afford to want. She stood abruptly. Fine, a walk, 5 minutes. I'll take what I can get. They left through the garden doors, following a stone path that wound between carefully trimmed hedges. The morning was crisp, the kind of autumn day that felt like borrowed time before winter arrived. Evelyn pulled her shawl tighter and tried not to notice how Adrian matched his stride to hers, how he didn't fill the silence with empty pleasantries like most men would have. You have 3 days left, she said finally, of your week. I'm aware. And then I'm accepting Lord Pemberton's proposal. Are you? Yes. Even though the thought of it makes you miserable? Misery is subjective. I'll be secure. My family will be saved. That's more than most people get. Adrian stopped walking, turning to face her. Is that really what you believe? That survival is the best you deserve? It's what's available. No, it's what you've been told is available. There's a difference. Evelyn laughed, but it came out sharp. You keep saying that like you have some alternative hidden in your pocket. You don't. Unless you're planning to pay off my father's debts yourself, which would be inappropriate and insulting, there is no other option. This is reality, not a fairy tale. What if I did? The words hung in the air between them. Evelyn stared at him. What if you did what? Pay off the debts. Her stomach dropped. You can't be serious. Why not? Because she couldn't breathe properly. Because that's insane. Because you don't even know me. Because I'm not a charity case for you to rescue like some damsel in a melodrama. I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm trying to give you a choice. That's the same thing. It's not. Adrian's voice was calm, infuriatingly reasonable. Rescue implies you're helpless. Choice implies you have power. I'm offering you the second one. Why? The question came out raw. Why do you care what happens to me? Why does it matter to you whether I marry Lord Pemberton or live in poverty or anything else? He was quiet for a moment, and something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like pain. Because I watched someone I loved make the same choice you're making, he said finally. She married for security instead of happiness, told herself it was practical, convinced herself she could live with it. His jaw tightened, and then 2 years later she was dead. Carriage accident. She was running away. The air went out of Evelyn's lungs. I'm sorry, she whispered. So am I. But sorry doesn't change anything, does it? It doesn't bring people back. It doesn't undo the choices that led them to that road in the rain. But he looked at her, and his eyes were full of something Evelyn couldn't name. I can't help her anymore. But I can help you, if you'll let me. I'm not her. I know that. This isn't the same situation. Isn't it? Evelyn turned away, her thoughts spinning. This was madness. Complete madness. Men didn't just offer to pay strangers' debts out of guilt about the past. They especially didn't do it for women they'd known less than a week. What would you want in return? She asked. Nothing. Everyone wants something. Not everyone. You're lying. I'm not. Adrian moved closer, but still kept a careful distance between them. I'm a duke, Evelyn. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. Your family's debts wouldn't even register as a significant expense. And I don't want your gratitude, your obligation, or anything else you're imagining. I just want you to have the freedom to choose your own life. Why? Because you deserve it. Because watching you slowly suffocate yourself is unbearable. Because... He stopped, shook his head. Does it matter why? Yes. Why? Because if I accept this, if I let you do this, I need to understand what I'm accepting. I need to know what you really want. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. And Evelyn had the distinct sense that he was debating whether to tell her the truth or a more palatable version of it. "I want you to stay," he said finally. Her heart stuttered. "Stay. Here, at Blackthornne. Not as a guest, not as someone passing through on her way to a miserable marriage. Just stay." "As what?" "As whatever you want to be." The world tilted sideways. Evelyn grabbed the garden wall to steady herself, her mind racing through implications and impossibilities. He couldn't mean what she thought he meant. That would be. "You're asking me to be your mistress," she said flatly. "No." Adrian's voice went sharp. "That's not what I'm suggesting." "Then what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you don't have to marry anyone right now, that you could have time to figure out what you actually want instead of just accepting the least terrible option available. I'm suggesting—" He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "I'm suggesting friendship, Evelyn, or at least the beginning of one. Men and women can't be friends." "Says who?" "Says everyone. Everyone is wrong about a lot of things." She wanted to laugh, wanted to scream, wanted to do something other than stand there feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "This is insane," she said. "Probably. People will talk. They already are. My reputation will survive. You'd be a guest at my estate, properly chaperoned. Your mother could stay too. There's nothing scandalous about it, except for the part where you're paying my family's debts. No one has to know about that. My father will know. My mother will know. And they'll accept it because the alternative is debtor's prison." He was right. Evelyn hated that he was right. "I can't," she said. "I can't just... I came here to secure my future, to do what needed to be done. I can't throw that away because a man I barely know made me an offer that sounds too good to be true. Even if it is true, especially if it is." She met his eyes. "Because if I accept this, I'm not making a practical choice anymore. I'm not being smart or strategic or any of the things I need to be to survive. I'm just hoping. And hope is dangerous." "So is resignation. At least resignation is predictable." Adrian smiled, but it was sad. "You're so afraid of being hurt that you've decided to hurt yourself first. That's not strength, Evelyn. That's just a different kind of surrender." The words cut deeper than they should have. Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest, something she'd been holding together through sheer force of will. 3 days, she said. "You have 3 days left. And then I'm doing what I came here to do, and I don't want to hear another word about alternatives or choices or any of it. Understood?" "Understood." She walked away before he could say anything else, before she could do something stupid like cry or collapse or admit that he was right about everything. That night, Evelyn's mother cornered her in their shared sitting room. "Lord Pemberton is growing impatient," Margaret said without preamble. "He mentioned to Lady Beatrice that you've been evasive. I've been polite. Polite isn't the same as available. He wants an answer, Evelyn, a real one." "I know." "Then why are you delaying?" "Because a man with gray eyes offered me freedom, and I don't know if I'm brave enough to take it. Because I'm terrified that if I say yes to Lord Pemberton, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd chosen differently. Because I can feel myself breaking apart, and I don't know how to stop it." "I'm not delaying, Evelyn said instead. "I just want to be certain." "You seemed certain 2 weeks ago." "The 2 weeks ago I hadn't—" She stopped herself. "Hadn't what?" Her mother's eyes sharpened. "This isn't about the Duke, is it?" "No." "Evelyn Marie Harrow, look at me." She looked. "That man is dangerous," Margaret said quietly. "Not in the way your father was dangerous, reckless and stupid with money, dangerous in a different way. He makes you think things could be different. He makes you believe in possibilities that don't exist for women like us." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? I was young once, too. I had a man look at me the way Adrian Blackthornne looks at you. And I chose security instead. And it was the right choice, even though it was the hard one." "Was it?" Evelyn heard herself ask. "Was it really the right choice? Because you've spent 30 years married to a man who gambled away everything you had. You stopped eating because we couldn't afford food. You watched your daughter agree to marry a man old enough to be her grandfather because that's the only option left. Was that worth the security? Margaret's face went white. How dare you? I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm asking honestly. Was it worth it? Her mother was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice shook. It was the only choice I had. Just like Lord Pemberton is the only choice you have. And if you throw that away for some romantic fantasy the Duke has spun, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Maybe. Or maybe I'll regret not taking the chance. There is no chance. There's reality. And reality is that men like Adrian Blackthornne don't marry women like you. They flirt. They interfere. They make you believe in things that can't happen, and then they move on to the next distraction while you're left with nothing. He's not like that. You've known him a week, and I've known Lord Pemberton 3 months. And the only thing I've learned is that he views me as slightly more interesting than livestock. They were both shouting now. Somewhere a door closed, servants making themselves scarce. Margaret took a shaky breath. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection, I need... Evelyn stopped, because she didn't know how to finish that sentence. What did she need? Freedom? Choice? Something more than the slow death of marrying a man she'd never love? I need time, she said finally. You don't have time. 3 more days and we leave. Either engaged to Lord Pemberton or not. And if it's not, her mother's voice cracked. If it's not, we lose everything. She left the room, and Evelyn stood there feeling like she was being torn in half. The 5th day brought a masquerade ball. It was Lady Beatrice's idea, an elaborate affair with costumes and masks and enough champagne to drown in. Evelyn wore a dress of midnight blue silk and a mask decorated with silver stars. She looked like someone playing at being mysterious, which felt appropriate given that she no longer knew who she actually was. The ballroom glittered with candlelight and jewels. Couples whirled across the floor in carefully choreographed patterns. Evelyn stood at the edge watching it all, feeling disconnected from the spectacle, from herself. You look like you're planning an escape. She didn't have to turn to know it was Adrian. He'd found her even through the crowd, even behind her mask. Maybe I am, she said. Where would you go? I don't know. Somewhere no one knows my name. Somewhere I could be anyone. You could do that, if you wanted to. No, I couldn't. Why not? Because I'm not brave enough. Adrian moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him even in the crowded room. He wasn't wearing a mask. Apparently dukes were above such things. I think you're braver than you know, he said. Based on what evidence? Based on the fact that you're still here, still fighting. Most people would have given up by now. Fighting implies I have a chance of winning. This is just delaying the inevitable. Is it? Before she could answer, Lord Pemberton appeared, looking irritated and slightly drunk. There you are, he said to Evelyn. I've been looking everywhere. We need to talk. Now? Evelyn asked. Yes, now. Privately. Adrian's jaw tightened. Perhaps this could wait until... This doesn't concern you, Blackthornne, Pemberton interrupted. Miss Harrow and I have business to conclude. Miss Harrow is a person, not a business transaction. She's my future wife, and I'll thank you to remember that. She hasn't accepted yet. She will. Won't you, my dear? All 3 of them stood there, the moment crystallizing into something sharp and fragile. Evelyn felt like she was watching herself from a distance, seeing clearly for the first time just how absurd this all was. 2 men arguing over her like she was a prize to be claimed, her own future being decided in whispered negotiations and social obligations. No, she heard herself say. Pemberton blinked. I beg your pardon? I said no. I won't. You won't what? I won't marry you. The words hung in the air, impossible to take back. Evelyn felt her heart hammering against her ribs, felt the weight of what she'd just done settling over her like a physical thing. Pemberton's face went red. You're refusing me? Yes. After everything, after your family's situation, you're refusing me? Yes. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? Actually, Evelyn said, her voice steadier than she felt, I think I'm finally figuring out what I'm not willing to throw away anymore. Pemberton looked between her and Adrian, understanding dawning in his expression. I see. This is about him. This is about me, Evelyn corrected. This is about refusing to spend the rest of my life pretending I'm fine when I'm not. This is about choosing something other than the least terrible option available. You'll regret this. Maybe, but at least it'll be my regret. Pemberton turned to Adrian. I hope you're pleased with yourself, turning a perfectly reasonable arrangement into some romantic farce. I didn't turn anything into anything, Adrian said quietly. I just gave her the space to make her own choice. Well, she's made it. And when this falls apart, and it will, don't come crawling back to me. He stormed off, and suddenly Evelyn couldn't breathe. The ballroom felt too hot, too crowded, too full of people who would all know by morning that she'd refused Lord Pemberton, that she'd thrown away her family's salvation for what exactly? She pushed through the crowd, desperate for air, for space, for anything other than the suffocating weight of what she'd just done. She made it to the terrace before the tears started, hot and furious and impossible to stop. Evelyn, Adrian had followed her. Of course he had. I just ruined everything, she said. My family, the debts. I just destroyed our only chance, and I don't even know why. What was I thinking? You were thinking that you deserve more than a marriage that makes you want to die. That's not practical. Maybe not, but it's true. She turned on him, anger and fear and something else she didn't want to name all tangled together. This is your fault. You and your talk about choices and alternatives, and you made me want things I can't have. What things? I don't know. Everything. Something. More than this. She was shouting, didn't care. I had a plan. I had it all figured out. And then you came along and ruined it with your questions and your attention and your eyes that see too much. Evelyn, don't. Just don't. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to pull herself together and failing. What happens now? My father's debts don't disappear just because I made a dramatic scene. My family doesn't suddenly become solvent. I just threw away the only solution we had. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. Evelyn, listen to me. Adrian's hands closed gently around her wrists, pulling them away from her face. The debts are already paid. Time stopped. What? I paid them 3 days ago. Your family's creditors have been satisfied in full. Your father's estate is secure. The world tilted. You, what? I couldn't watch you sacrifice yourself, so I removed the reason you felt you had to. Evelyn stared at him, her mind refusing to process what he was saying. You paid my father's debts without telling me? Yes. Before I refused Pemberton. Yes. So She couldn't finish the sentence. The implications were too enormous. I didn't have to refuse him. I could have still married him if I wanted to. The debts were already gone. Yes. Then why didn't you tell me? Adrian's expression was impossibly gentle. Because I needed to know what you'd choose when you thought you still had to choose. I needed to know if you'd pick yourself. And suddenly Evelyn understood. He hadn't manipulated her, hadn't forced her hand. He'd given her freedom and then stepped back to see what she'd do with it. I picked myself, she whispered. You did. I didn't know I could do that. Now you do. She started laughing, except it came out half like crying. Relief and terror, and something dangerously close to joy all colliding together. She'd refused Pemberton not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because even thinking the debt still existed, even believing her family's future hung in the balance, she'd chosen herself anyway. I don't know what happens now, she said. Neither do I. That's terrifying. Yes. But also, she looked up at him, at this man who'd disrupted her entire life in the space of a week, who'd seen through her masks and challenged her resignation and somehow made her brave enough to want more than survival. Also kind of amazing. Adrian smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Kind of amazing. I'll take it. I'm still angry at you. That's fair. You should have told me about the debts. Probably. And I don't know what you want from me. What this is. What we are. Neither do I, Adrian said honestly. But I'd like to find out, if you're willing. Evelyn thought about all the things she should say, all the reasonable objections, the social complications, the 100 ways this could go wrong. She thought about her mother's warning, about society's judgment, about the safe path she'd just burned to the ground. Then she thought about how it felt to finally choose herself, to say no to what she didn't want and yes to uncertainty, to be terrified and brave at the same time. One condition, she said. Name it. No more secrets, no more grand gestures without telling me. If we're doing this, whatever this is, we do it honestly. Agreed. And I'm not your charity case. You never were. And I'm not staying here indefinitely without understanding what I'm staying for. Adrian took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. You're staying because you want to. Because for the first time in your life, you have the freedom to choose what happens next. And because maybe, you're curious about what we could become if we both stopped being afraid. Evelyn's breath caught, because that was it exactly. The terrifying, exhilarating truth she'd been avoiding. She was curious, she was terrified, she was free. And for the first time in months, she wanted to see what happened next. The morning after the masquerade, reality arrived with her mother's fist pounding on Evelyn's door. Open this. Now. Evelyn had barely slept. She'd spent most of the night replaying the conversation with Adrian, trying to understand what she'd agreed to, what it meant, what happened next. Freedom sounded beautiful in theory. In practice, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff with no idea how far down the ground was. She opened the door. Margaret pushed past her, face pale, hands shaking. Tell me it isn't true. Tell me you didn't refuse Lord Pemberton in front of half of London society. I can't tell you that. Evelyn, her mother's voice cracked. What have you done? I made a choice. You made a disaster. Do you have any idea? She stopped, pressing her fingers to her temples like she was trying to physically hold her thoughts together. Lord Pemberton left this morning, before dawn. He told Lady Beatrice that you humiliated him, that you led him on for weeks just to refuse him publicly. That's not what happened. It doesn't matter what happened. It matters what people believe. Margaret grabbed Evelyn's shoulders. We're ruined, completely ruined. No respectable man will offer for you now, not after you rejected one of the wealthiest lords in England. And your father, when he hears about this, the debts are paid. Her mother stopped mid-sentence. What? Father's debts, they're paid. All of them. Margaret's grip loosened. That's impossible. It's not. They were settled 3 days ago. By whom? Evelyn hesitated. This was the moment. Once she said it out loud, there would be no taking it back, no pretending this was anything other than what it was. The Duke of Blackthornne. The silence that followed felt like it had weight. He paid your father's debts? Margaret said slowly, like she was trying to translate a foreign language, without asking anything in return. Yes? And you believe him? Yes, I do. Her mother laughed, but it sounded wrong, too high and sharp. You stupid, stupid girl. Men like Adrian Blackthornne don't give away fortunes out of kindness. They invest, and you just became his investment. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Explain it to me, because from where I'm standing, you threw away a legitimate proposal for what exactly? A man who paid off your debts without telling you? That's not generosity, Evelyn. That's possession. You don't know him. Neither do you. You've known him a week. And I knew Lord Pemberton for months, and it didn't make the marriage any less of a transaction. They were shouting again. Evelyn could hear movement in the hallway, more servants disappearing, more witnesses to the slow implosion of her family. Margaret's voice dropped to something dangerous. What did he ask for in return? Nothing. I don't believe you. I don't care if you believe me. It's the truth. Then you're even more naive than I thought. Her mother moved to the window, staring out at the manicured gardens like they personally offended her. Men always want something, always. And the ones who pretend they don't are the most dangerous of all, because you don't see the trap until you're already caught in it. Maybe some men are different. No man is that different. How would you know? You married father when you were 19 and you've spent 30 years assuming every man is exactly like him. The words landed like a slap. Margaret turned slowly, and Evelyn saw something in her mother's face she'd never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment, but recognition. Like she was looking at a younger version of herself and hating what she saw. "You think you're so clever," Margaret said quietly. "You think you've found some loophole, some way to have everything without consequences. But there are always consequences. And when they come, and they will, don't expect me to save you from them." She left, and Evelyn stood alone in the too-bright room, feeling like she'd just lost something she couldn't name. By noon, the entire house party knew. Evelyn could feel it in the way conversations stopped when she entered a room, the way women clustered together whispering behind fans, the way men looked at her with either pity or speculation. Lady Beatrice, Adrian's aunt, requested her presence in the drawing room with the kind of summons that wasn't really a request. The older woman was seated by the fire, diamonds glittering at her throat, expression unreadable. "Sit," she said. Evelyn sat. "You've created quite a situation." "I'm aware." "Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, you've just destroyed your reputation, embarrassed a peer of the realm, and put my nephew in an extraordinarily awkward position. I didn't ask him to pay your family's debts. No, you didn't. That was entirely his idea, which is why half the people here think you're a fortune hunter who manipulated him, and the other half think you're his mistress." The bluntness of it stole Evelyn's breath. I would never. "I know that, you know that. Adrian knows that. But society doesn't care about truth. It cares about appearances, and right now the appearance is catastrophically bad." Lady Beatrice leaned forward. "So let me ask you plainly, Miss Harrow, what are your intentions toward my nephew?" "I don't have intentions. What were they?" Friends seemed inadequate. Anything else seemed presumptuous. "We're trying to figure out what this is. That's not good enough. It's all I have." "Then let me offer some clarity. Adrian has not seriously considered marriage since his first engagement ended in tragedy. For years, I've watched him go through the motions of society, fulfilling obligations, maintaining appearances, but never truly present, never truly alive." She paused. "Until you." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I don't know what you've done to him," Lady Beatrice continued, "but he's different now, more engaged, more himself, and I'm grateful for that, truly. But I won't stand by and watch him destroyed a second time." I'm not trying to destroy him. Maybe not intentionally, but you're in an impossible position, and impossible positions make people do desperate things. The older woman's gaze sharpened. "Adrian thinks he can give you freedom, but freedom costs, Miss Harrow, and someone always has to pay the price." "What price?" "His reputation if he's not careful. Yours if you stay. Your family's if you leave." Lady Beatrice stood. "I suggest you decide which price you're willing to pay, before the decision gets made for you." Evelyn left the drawing room feeling like she'd been dissected and found wanting. The walls of Blackthornne Manor seemed to close in, every corridor a reminder that she didn't belong here, that she was playing at being something she wasn't, that any moment the entire fragile construction would collapse. She found Adrian in the library, surrounded by ledgers and correspondence, looking every inch the Duke he was supposed to be. He glanced up when she entered, and his expression immediately shifted. "What happened?" "Your aunt thinks I'm either a fortune hunter or a fool." "She said that?" Not in so many words, but the implication was clear. Evelyn sank into a chair. "Everyone knows. About Lord Pemberton, about the debts, about everything." Adrian set down his pen. "I'm sorry." "Why are you sorry? You didn't create this situation." "Didn't I? I interfered. I pushed. I made you think you had choices you didn't have." "I did have choices. I made them. And now you're paying for them." "So are you." She looked at him directly. "Your aunt said people think I manipulated you, that I'm using you. People think a lot of things. Most of them are wrong. But some of them aren't." Evelyn twisted her hands together. "I didn't manipulate you, but I am using you. I'm using your money, your protection, your belief that I'm worth saving. And I don't know how to reconcile that with also trying to be someone who makes her own choices." Adrian came around the desk, sitting in the chair across from her. You're not using me. You're accepting help. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. One implies deception, the other implies trust. I don't know if I know how to trust people. Then learn. How? By trying, by failing, by trying again. He leaned forward. Evelyn, I'm not expecting you to be perfect. I'm not expecting you to have everything figured out. I just want you to stop punishing yourself for wanting more than survival. What if wanting more makes everything worse? What if it doesn't? She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that things could be different, that she could be different, but decades of training, of being told that women like her didn't get happy endings, didn't disappear overnight. I need to talk to my father, she said abruptly. Adrian blinked. What? My father. I need to tell him what happened. He'll have heard rumors by now, and if I don't explain... She stood, pacing. He'll assume the worst. He'll think I destroyed everything out of selfishness or stupidity or I don't know what. But I need to face him. I need to own this choice. Do you want me to come with you? No, this is something I have to do alone. It was a 3-hour carriage ride to the Harrow estate, and Evelyn spent every minute of it rehearsing what she'd say. Father, I refused Lord Pemberton. Father, our debts are paid, but not by me. Father, I've made choices that might ruin us socially, but at least we're not bankrupt. None of it sounded adequate. The estate looked smaller than she remembered, shabbier. The gardens needed work. Paint was peeling from the shutters. All the small signs of genteel poverty that she'd learned to ignore growing up were suddenly impossible to miss. Her father was in his study, as always. Richard Harrow looked up when she entered, and Evelyn saw immediately that he had already heard. His face was gray, exhausted, like he'd aged a decade overnight. So it's true, he said without preamble. You refused him. Yes. Why? The question was so simple, so direct, that it caught her off guard. She'd expected anger, accusations, demands, not this quiet, defeated curiosity. Because I couldn't do it, she said honestly. I tried. I wanted to. But when the moment came, I couldn't. Couldn't or wouldn't. Does it matter? Her father stood slowly, moving to the window. Your mother says the Duke of Blackthornne paid our debts. He did. Why would he do that? Because How did she explain this? Because he thought I deserved a choice. What kind of choice? The kind where I'm not just a solution to someone else's problem. The kind where I get to decide what my life looks like instead of just accepting whatever option causes the least damage. Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I failed you. Evelyn stared. What? I failed you. I failed your mother. I made bad decisions, took stupid risks, and when everything collapsed, I put the burden of fixing it on you. He turned to face her. And you were willing to carry that burden, willing to marry a man you didn't love, to sacrifice your entire future because I was too much of a coward to face the consequences of my own mistakes. Father, let me finish. He moved closer. I should have been the one to find a solution. I should have sold the estate, taken work, done something, anything, other than ask my daughter to save me. And when you came to me 3 months ago and said you'd accepted Pemberton's suit, I should have told you no. Should have said we'd find another way. But I didn't, because I was relieved. Because it was easier to let you fix everything than to fix it myself. Evelyn felt something crack in her chest. She'd spent so long being angry at her father, resenting him for the position he'd put her in, that she'd never considered he might resent himself just as much. The debts are paid now, she said quietly, by a man you've known a week. What does he want in return? He says nothing. Do you believe him? Did she? Evelyn thought about Adrian's gray eyes, his careful distance, the way he'd given her freedom, and then stepped back to see what she'd do with it. Yes, she said. I do. Then you're braver than I am. Richard returned to his desk, suddenly looking old and tired. What happens now? I don't know. Will you marry him, the Duke? He hasn't asked, but he will. Maybe. I don't know. Evelyn sat down, feeling exhausted. I don't have a plan anymore, Father. I don't know what I'm doing or where this leads. I just know I couldn't marry Lord Pemberton. I couldn't go through with it. Because you love someone else? The question hung in the air between them. I don't know, Evelyn said honestly. I barely know him. But when I'm with him, I feel like I can breathe. Like I'm not performing anymore. Like I'm allowed to be myself instead of just whoever people need me to be. That's how I felt about your mother, Richard said quietly. 30 years ago, before everything went wrong. What changed? I did. I got scared, made bad decisions, and forgot that the woman I loved was also the person I was supposed to protect. And by the time I remembered, it was too late. He met her eyes. Don't make my mistakes, Evelyn. Don't choose security over happiness and then wonder why you're miserable. But if I choose happiness and it doesn't work, if this all falls apart, then at least you tried. At least you took the risk. He smiled sadly. That's more than I can say. Evelyn left her father's study feeling like the world had shifted on its axis. Her entire life, she'd been operating under the assumption that security was the only goal worth pursuing, that everything else was frivolous luxury she couldn't afford. But what if she'd been wrong? What if security without happiness was just a different kind of prison? She returned to Blackthornne Manor as the sun was setting, painting the stone facade in shades of gold and crimson. The house party was winding down, guests beginning to depart, carriages being loaded, servants moving with the efficient chaos of endings. Adrian found her in the garden, sitting on the same bench where they'd had their first real conversation. How did it go? He asked. Better than expected, worse than hoped. She looked up at him. My father told me not to make his mistakes. What mistakes? Choosing security over happiness. Adrian sat beside her, close but not touching. Is that what you think you're doing? Choosing happiness? I think I'm choosing possibility, which might become happiness, or might become disaster. I honestly have no idea. That's terrifying. Completely. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky darken, listening to the sounds of departing guests echoing from the main house. Most of them are leaving tomorrow, Adrian said finally. The house party's over. I know. Your mother wants to leave too. She made that very clear to my aunt. Evelyn's stomach twisted. And you want us to stay. I want you to stay, if you want to. For how long? As long as you need, as long as you want. He hesitated. I know this is complicated. I know society will talk, that your reputation is already damaged, that staying here longer won't help. But I'm asking anyway. Why? Because I'm selfish. Because I want more time to figure out what this is. Because... He stopped, shook his head. Because when I imagine you leaving, going back to your father's estate, or finding some other practical solution, it feels wrong. And I know that's not fair to you, that I shouldn't put that pressure on you when you're already dealing with so much. But I'm asking anyway. Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she recognized. Fear. Hope. The same impossible mixture of wanting and uncertainty that she'd been carrying around for days. If I stay, she said carefully, people will assume that this is... I know. My mother already thinks you're trying to possess me. I'm not. I know that, but she doesn't. Evelyn took a breath. And honestly, I'm not sure I know what you are trying to do. You say you want to give me freedom, but freedom to do what? To stay here indefinitely as your what? Guest? Friend? Something else? I don't know yet. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She wanted to be frustrated with him, but she couldn't quite manage it, because he was being honest, painfully, uncomfortably honest, and that was more than most people ever managed. I'll stay, she said. 1 more week. But after that I need to know what this is. I need to know if there's a future here or if I'm just delaying the inevitable. Agreed. And my mother stays too. And we maintain proper appearances, no matter what people think or say. Of course. And if at the end of that week I decide to leave, then I'll let you go. No arguments, no pressure. I promise. He held out his hand, and after a moment Evelyn took it. His palm was warm against hers, his grip firm but not possessive. 1 week, she repeated. 1 week. The next day, most of the guests departed. Lady Caroline left with dramatic pronouncements about scandal. Lord Pemberton's friends left with barely concealed disdain. Even Lady Beatrice returned to London, though not before pulling Evelyn aside one last time. "I still think you're making a mistake," the older woman said. "But it's your mistake to make. Just remember, my nephew has already lost one woman he cared about. Don't make him lose another. I'm not trying to hurt him. No one ever is. Hurt happens anyway." By evening, Blackthornne Manor felt like a different place, quieter, emptier, somehow more real without all the performance of society watching. Evelyn's mother had agreed to stay, though her disapproval radiated from every interaction. They took dinner in the smaller dining room, just the four of them. Evelyn, Margaret, Adrian, and his aunt's companion, who'd stayed behind to maintain propriety. The conversation was stilted, awkward. Her mother barely spoke. Adrian tried to make small talk and gave up. The companion, an elderly woman named Mrs. Fletcher, seemed oblivious to the tension. "This is unbearable," Margaret said finally, setting down her fork. "We shouldn't be here. We should go home, face whatever consequences come, and stop pretending this situation is anything other than a disaster waiting to happen." "Mother!" "No, Evelyn. Enough." Margaret turned to Adrian. "I appreciate your generosity in settling our debts, truly, but I won't sit here and watch you turn my daughter into something she's not. Whatever your intentions, my intentions," Adrian interrupted quietly, "are to give your daughter the freedom to make her own choices. Nothing more, nothing less. And what happens when those choices destroy her reputation completely? When no respectable man will have her? When she's trapped here, dependent on your goodwill, with no prospects and no future? Then she'll still have more freedom than she had marrying Lord Pemberton. You don't know that. Neither do you." They stared at each other across the table, and Evelyn felt like she was watching two people fight over who got to decide her future, which was, she realized with sudden clarity, exactly what was happening. "Stop," she said. Both of them turned to look at her. "Both of you, stop. I'm not a prize you're fighting over. I'm not a child who needs protecting. I'm a woman trying to figure out what she wants, and neither of you gets to make that decision for me." She stood, hands shaking but voice steady. "Mother, I love you, but I'm not going home. Not yet. And Adrian," she looked at him, "I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm not staying because you want me to. I'm staying because I want to, for myself." "Evelyn," her mother started. "No. I'm done explaining myself. I'm done justifying my choices. I'm done living my life based on what everyone else thinks I should do." She took a breath. 1 week, then I'll decide what happens next. And whatever I decide, it's going to be my decision. Mine. She left the dining room and didn't look back. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She paced her room, thoughts spinning, trying to understand what she'd gotten herself into. 1 week. 7 days to figure out if staying at Blackthornne was the beginning of something real or just a beautiful delay before reality crashed back down. A soft knock interrupted her pacing. "It's me," Adrian's voice came through the door. "Can we talk?" She opened it to find him standing in the hallway, still dressed, looking as restless as she felt. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "No, not really." He ran a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking about what you said at dinner, about making your own choices. And you're right. I have been trying to control this situation, trying to give you options as if offering you freedom is somehow different from taking away your agency. I didn't mean, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "I told you about my first engagement, about Caroline. What I didn't tell you was that she died because she was running away from a marriage she didn't want. And I knew she was unhappy, knew she felt trapped, and I told myself it would get better, that she just needed time. And then she was gone, and I spent years wondering if I could have stopped it, if I'd just paid more attention, or pushed harder, or done something differently." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Adrian, so when I met you, and I saw you doing the same thing, choosing security over happiness, telling yourself it was fine when clearly it wasn't. I couldn't just watch. I had to do something. But in trying to save you from making Caroline's mistake, I think I made my own. I tried to control your choices instead of just trusting you to make them. You gave me freedom. I gave you money. Freedom is something you have to take for yourself. He met her eyes. So here's what I'm proposing. No more grand gestures. No more me trying to orchestrate your future. You stay or leave based on what you want, not what I want, or your mother wants, or society expects. And if you stay, he paused. If you stay, it's because you're choosing this, choosing me, not because you're grateful or obligated or running from something else. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere in the past week, I stopped trying to save you and started falling in love with you. And I need to know if there's any possibility you feel the same. The words hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Evelyn's heart was racing, her thoughts a chaotic mess. This was it, the moment where she could step back, could laugh it off as too soon, too fast, too complicated, could protect herself from the possibility of getting hurt, or she could take the risk. I don't know if I love you, she said honestly. I don't think I know what love is supposed to feel like. But when I think about leaving here, about going back to my old life and pretending none of this happened, I feel like I'm suffocating. And when I think about staying, about seeing where this goes, I'm terrified. But I also feel alive, and I haven't felt alive in so long. Adrian smiled, and it was genuine, unguarded. Terrified and alive is a good start. Is it enough? For now, yes. She wanted to close the distance between them, wanted to kiss him, and let that answer all the questions she didn't know how to ask. But this was too important to rush, too fragile to risk breaking. 1 week, she said instead. At the end of it, I'll give you a real answer, not based on what I'm running from or what I'm grateful for, based on what I actually want. I can live with that. He left, and Evelyn returned to bed, her mind quieter now, thoughts settling into something like clarity. She had 7 days to figure out if this feeling, this terrifying, exhilarating, impossible feeling, was real. 7 days to decide if she was brave enough to choose uncertainty over security, risk over safety, love over survival. 7 days to figure out who Evelyn Harrow really was when she stopped being who everyone else needed her to be. The morning of the 6th day, everything changed. A rider arrived at dawn, demanding to see Evelyn immediately. She came down to the entrance hall still in her dressing gown, confused and half asleep, to find a young man in mud-splattered clothing holding an envelope. Miss Harrow? Yes? From your father. He said it was urgent. She took the letter with shaking hands, breaking the seal. Her father's handwriting was barely legible, written in obvious haste. Evelyn. Lord Pemberton has filed a breach of promise suit. Claims you accepted his proposal verbally, then reneged publicly, causing him significant social and financial harm. His lawyers are demanding £20,000 in damages, or they'll proceed with a public trial. I don't have that kind of money. Even with the debts paid, I don't have it. And if this goes to court, the scandal will destroy us all. I don't know what to do. The letter fell from her hands. A breach of promise suit, public trial. £20,000, all because she'd chosen herself. Adrian appeared at the top of the stairs. What's wrong? Evelyn looked up at him, and suddenly the beautiful week they'd spent, the careful conversations, the growing trust, the possibility of something real, felt like it was built on sand. Lord Pemberton is suing me, she said, her voice hollow, for refusing him. And if we can't pay, he'll take us to court. He'll destroy everything. The fear she'd been holding at bay crashed over her like a wave, and Evelyn realized with perfect, terrible clarity that freedom had never been free at all. Someone was always going to pay the price. And this time, it might cost her everything she'd just learned to want. Adrian was down the stairs before Evelyn could process what was happening, picking up the letter from where it had fallen, reading it with an expression that went from concern to fury in the space of 3 seconds. This is extortion, he said flatly. It's legal. Evelyn's voice sounded distant, even to her own ears. Breach of promise suits are perfectly legal. If he can prove I accepted his proposal, did you? Formally? She tried to remember. The library. The clinical proposal. His question, "Do you accept?" And then Adrian had interrupted before she could answer. "No, I never said yes, but witnesses heard him propose. They'll assume assumptions aren't evidence. In a courtroom filled with his friends, with a sympathetic judge who knows him personally?" Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself. "It won't matter what I actually said. It'll matter what they believe happened." Her mother appeared in the hallway, already dressed, face set in grim lines. "How much?" 20,000 pounds. Margaret's face went white. "We don't have that." "I know. Even with the debts paid, the estate doesn't generate that kind of income. We'd have to sell everything, and even then, I know, Mother." Adrian was still reading the letter, his jaw tight. "This was written yesterday. Your father just received it?" "Apparently." "Which means Pemberton's lawyers have been preparing this since the moment you refused him, probably before." Adrian looked up. "This isn't about money. It's about revenge. He wants to humiliate you publicly, make an example of you. Then he's going to succeed because I don't have 20,000 pounds and I can't magic it out of thin air. No, but I can." The words dropped like stones. Evelyn stared at him. "Absolutely not. It's the simplest solution. You've already paid my father's debts. You can't keep throwing money at every problem I have." "Why not?" "Because then I'm not free. I'm just owned by someone different." "That's not, isn't it?" She was shaking now, anger and fear and frustration all tangled together. "You pay this, and then what? The next thing goes wrong and you pay that too? I become your permanent charity case. Your project. You're not a project. Then stop trying to fix me." The hall went silent. Even the servants had disappeared, leaving them alone with the wreckage of whatever they'd been building over the past week. Margaret spoke carefully. "Adrian, we appreciate the offer, but Evelyn is right. This isn't your responsibility. Neither were the debts, but I paid them anyway. And look where that got us." Evelyn's mother looked older suddenly, tired. "Lord Pemberton wouldn't be suing if he didn't think Evelyn refused him for you. This is retaliation, which means involving you further will only make things worse." Adrian opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, because she was right, and they all knew it. "So what do we do?" he asked finally. Evelyn closed her eyes, trying to think past the panic. There had to be a solution. There had to be some way to... An idea flickered. Dangerous. Possibly insane. But it was something. "We fight him," she said. Both Adrian and her mother turned to stare. "What?" Margaret said. "We fight the suit. In court. Publicly. Evelyn, that's madness. The scandal alone will happen anyway." She was pacing now, thoughts crystallizing. "If we pay, we look guilty. If we settle quietly, everyone assumes he was right. Either way, my reputation is destroyed. But if we fight, if we go to court and prove I never accepted his proposal, you'll still lose," her mother said flatly. "His word against yours, his witnesses against ours, his social standing against nothing. I know." Evelyn stopped pacing. "Which is why we don't fight on his terms. We fight on ours." "I don't understand." "Pemberton's suing for breach of promise. He claims I accepted and then refused him publicly. But what if we argue he never had the right to propose in the first place?" Adrian's eyes sharpened. "Because you were already engaged to someone else." "Exactly." Margaret's expression went from confused to horrified. "No, absolutely not. It's the only way. You are not fabricating an engagement to win a lawsuit. Why not? Pemberton is fabricating an acceptance. Because that's perjury. Because if you're caught lying under oath, then we make sure I'm not lying." Evelyn turned to Adrian. "Marry me." The words hung in the air like something physical, solid enough to touch. Adrian went very still. "What?" "Not now. Not for real. Just backdated. We claim we were secretly engaged before Pemberton ever proposed. That his suit is baseless because I was already promised to you." "That's insane, man," Margaret said. "It's also brilliant," Adrian said slowly. "If we can establish a prior claim, if we can prove you were engaged to me before Pemberton made his offer, his entire case collapses. You can't breach a promise you never made because you weren't free to make it. You can't possibly be considering this. Why not? It solves the immediate problem by creating a dozen new ones. Margaret looked between them. You're talking about committing fraud, about lying to a court, about entering into a false engagement that will have to either become real or be publicly broken. And either way, Evelyn's reputation is already ruined, Evelyn interrupted. Mother, I refused one of the wealthiest men in England at a public ball. I'm living unchaperoned at a bachelor's estate. I'm here, and half of society thinks I'm Adrian's mistress. My reputation can't get worse. But if we do this, if we claim a prior engagement, we're not just defending against Pemberton's suit. We're rewriting the narrative. Suddenly, I'm not a manipulative fortune hunter. I'm a woman who refused an inappropriate proposal because I was already spoken for. It's still a lie. Is it? Evelyn looked at Adrian. You said yesterday that you were falling in love with me. Was that true? His eyes didn't waver. Yes. And I said I didn't know if I loved you, but I wanted to find out. Also true. So we're two people who care about each other, who are trying to figure out if there's a future here. Is it really that much of a lie to call that an engagement? Yes, because engagements have legal standing. Because if you claim to be engaged and then break it off, he can sue you for breach of promise too. Not if we actually get married. The silence that followed could have shattered glass. This is insane, Margaret whispered. Maybe it was. Probably it was. But Evelyn was so tired of being afraid, so exhausted by trying to make safe choices that only left her more trapped. And this was the opposite of safe. This was throwing herself off a cliff and hoping someone would catch her, or that she'd learn to fly. Give us a minute, Adrian said quietly to Margaret. Absolutely not. Please. Something in his voice must have convinced her because she left, though her disapproval radiated from every step. Adrian waited until she was gone, then turned to Evelyn. Are you seriously proposing that we get married to win a lawsuit? No, I'm proposing we get engaged to win a lawsuit. The marriage part, that would have to be real, or not happen at all. But either way, we'd figure it out after. That's a hell of a risk. I know. If we do this, if we claim a prior engagement, we'll have to maintain the pretense, publicly, convincingly, for weeks, maybe months, depending on how long the case takes. I know that too. And if we can't prove the engagement existed before Pemberton's proposal, his lawyers will tear us apart. They'll investigate, question witnesses, look for any evidence that we're lying. So we make sure there is evidence. Adrian laughed, but it sounded strained. How? We met a week ago. Did we? Evelyn was thinking fast now, pieces clicking together. Your aunt hosted that garden party in June. My family was invited. We could say we met then, started corresponding, fell in love through letters. That's 3 months ago. Long enough to be believable, short enough that people won't expect extensive documentation. Except letters can be verified, postmarks, handwriting analysis. Then we write them now and backdate them. Your estate is huge. You have access to old stationery, old postmarks. We create a correspondence that proves the engagement existed. Adrian stared at her. You've thought this through. I've had about 5 minutes, so not really, but it could work. If we're careful, if we're convincing, and if we're caught, then we're no worse off than we are now. Pemberton destroys us publicly, and we lose everything. At least this way we're fighting back. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was trying to read something written there. Why are you doing this? Because I'm tired of being afraid. Because I'm tired of making safe choices that only make me feel smaller. Because, she took a breath. Because you asked me yesterday if I felt the same way you did. And I didn't have an answer, but I think this is my answer. I'm willing to risk everything on the possibility of us, even if I don't know yet what us means. That's either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. Adrian smiled, and it was real this time, unguarded. Okay? Okay? Okay, let's do it. Let's fabricate an engagement, commit fraud, and see if we can beat Lord Pemberton at his own game. You're serious? Completely. But on one condition. What? If we do this, if we get through this, we don't end the engagement unless we both want to. This doesn't become something we're trapped in because of legal technicalities. It becomes something we choose, together. Evelyn felt her heart hammering. And if one of us wants to end it, then we end it, honestly. No games, no manipulation. Just two people deciding whether they want the same future. It was terrifying. It was also exactly what she'd been asking for. Real choice, real agency, real freedom to decide. Deal, she said. They shook hands like it was a business arrangement, which maybe it was. Except business arrangements didn't usually involve her pulse racing like this, or the way Adrian's fingers lingered against hers a moment longer than necessary. The next 3 days were chaos. Adrian summoned his solicitors from London, swearing them to secrecy before explaining the situation. The lead barrister, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Hartwell, listened to their plan with increasing incredulity. "You want me to defend a fabricated engagement in court?" "Yes," Adrian said. "Against Lord Pemberton, who has half of Parliament in his pocket." "Yes, using evidence you're going to create in the next 72 hours. "That's the general idea, Mrs." Hartwell set down her tea with deliberate care. "I could be disbarred. You could also win the most interesting case of your career." Interesting is not the word I would use, but she was smiling slightly. "Walk me through it, every detail, and for the love of everything, tell me you have something more than just backdated letters." They did, barely. Working through the night, Evelyn and Adrian constructed a plausible timeline. The garden party in June where they'd allegedly met. A walk through the rose garden. Meaningful glances. The beginning of a correspondence that grew increasingly personal. By August, a declaration of feelings. By September, a secret engagement kept quiet because of Evelyn's family's financial difficulties. "Why keep it secret?" Mrs. Hartwell asked. "Because my father's debts would make any public engagement look mercenary," Evelyn said. "We wanted to wait until the financial situation was resolved before making it official." Which it was, 3 weeks ago, when the Duke paid the debts. Exactly. We were planning to announce it after this house party. And Lord Pemberton's proposal was presumptuous and unwanted. I told him I was already spoken for, but he didn't believe me. Insisted on making a formal offer anyway. "Can you prove you told him?" Evelyn hesitated. "No, it was a private conversation." "Then his lawyers will say you're lying." "Let them. We have the letters. We have the timeline. We have witnesses who can testify they saw us together at the garden party." "But do you?" Adrian's aunt was there. So were 24 other guests. Who will be testifying that they saw two people have a conversation, not that they saw an engagement form? Mrs. Hartwell tapped her fingers on the table. "We need more. Something concrete. Something that proves the engagement existed in September before Pemberton made his offer." "Like what?" "A ring would help." Adrian stood abruptly. "I have one." He left the room, returning 5 minutes later with a small velvet box. Inside was an emerald ring, old-fashioned and beautiful, the stone a deep green that caught the light. "It was my grandmother's," he said quietly. "I was going to give it to Caroline, but she died before—" He stopped. "I've kept it in a drawer for years. Never knew what to do with it." Evelyn stared at the ring. This was real. This was his grandmother's ring, meant for someone he'd loved and lost, and he was offering it to her for a fake engagement that might become real or might destroy them both. "Are you sure?" she asked. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." She slipped it on. It fit perfectly, which felt like either a sign or a coincidence, and she'd stopped being able to tell the difference. "We'll say I gave it to you in September," Adrian said. "After you accepted my proposal. That's physical evidence the engagement existed. Anyone could claim that. Not anyone. This ring is documented in my family's estate records. There are photographs of my grandmother wearing it. Provenance that proves it's been in the Blackthornne family for 3 generations. If I gave it to you, I was serious about the engagement." Mrs. Hartwell examined the ring closely. "It's good. Not conclusive, but good. Combined with the letters and the timeline." She looked up. "We might actually pull this off, if you're both willing to commit completely. No hesitation, no second guessing. If you go into that courtroom and anyone suspects you're lying, Pemberton's lawyers will tear you apart. We won't hesitate, Evelyn said. You say that now, but under cross-examination, when they're questioning every detail, every date, every conversation, it's brutal. And if either of you break, you'll lose everything. We understand the risks. I'm not sure you do. Mrs. Hartwell closed her notebook. This isn't just about winning a case. If you claim you were engaged in September, and then the engagement falls apart 6 months from now, society will crucify you both. You'll be the woman who entrapped a duke. He'll be the fool who fell for it. Your reputations will never recover. And if we don't fight, if we pay the £20,000, then you're admitting fault. Pemberton wins, and your reputation is destroyed anyway. So we're damned either way. Unless the engagement becomes real. Unless you actually get married and make all of this moot. Evelyn and Adrian looked at each other. One problem at a time, Adrian said finally. The letters were the hardest part. They had to sound authentic, personal enough to be believable, specific enough to withstand scrutiny, but not so detailed that they contradicted themselves under questioning. Evelyn wrote drafts in her own hand, then copied them onto older paper Adrian had found in the estate archives. He did the same, his handwriting looser than usual to mimic the casualness of private correspondence. My dearest Evelyn, the first letter read. I find myself thinking of our conversation in the rose garden more than is probably proper. You asked me what I wanted from life, and I'm still formulating an answer, but I know it involves you. Is that too much, Adrian asked, reading over her shoulder. For June? Maybe. You barely knew me. I'm supposed to be falling in love with you. You're supposed to be interested, not obsessed. They rewrote it 3 times before it felt right. Interested, but cautious. Attracted, but careful. The kind of letter someone might actually send when they were testing the waters. By the 4th letter, dated early August, the tone had shifted. More personal. More vulnerable. I told you about Caroline, about how losing her made me question everything I thought I knew about love and risk, and whether it's worth trying again. You said something I keep coming back to, that being afraid is normal, but letting fear make all your decisions is a different kind of death. Were you speaking from experience? Yes, Evelyn had whispered when she read it. I was. The proposal letter, dated September 12th, was brief, direct, exactly what Adrian would write. I'm not good at flowery declarations, so I'll be plain. I love you. I want to marry you. I know your family's situation complicates things, and I know you're worried about how it will look, but I don't care about any of that. I only care about you. Say yes. They'd created 15 letters total, spread across 4 months. Not too many to seem obsessive, not too few to seem casual. A courtship told in paper and ink, with enough truth in them that Evelyn sometimes forgot they were fiction. These are good, Mrs. Hartwell said when she reviewed them. Really good. If I didn't know better, I'd believe them. That's the point, Adrian said. The point is also that you're going to have to testify to their authenticity under oath. Are you prepared to do that? Yes, they said in unison. Then we have a case. A slim one, but a case. She gathered her papers. The hearing is scheduled for next week. Pemberton's lawyers are pushing for it to be public. They want the scandal. We're arguing for a closed courtroom, but the judge may side with them. Let it be public, Evelyn said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare. What? Mrs. Hartwell said. Let it be public. Let everyone see what Pemberton is doing. A man suing a woman for refusing to marry him, for daring to choose someone else. Let society watch that happen. Let them judge. They'll judge you too. Let them. I'm tired of hiding, tired of being afraid of what people think. If we're going to do this, let's do it completely. Mrs. Hartwell looked at Adrian. Your Grace? It's Evelyn's decision, he said quietly. I'll support whatever she chooses. Then it's settled. Public hearing, which means every detail of your relationship will be examined, questioned, and dissected in front of an audience that includes most of London's society. Are you absolutely certain? Evelyn thought about the past 3 months of her life, the resignation, the fear, the slow suffocation of trying to be someone she wasn't. She thought about standing in the library refusing Lord Pemberton, about the terrifying freedom of choosing herself for the first time. "I'm certain," she said. The day before the hearing, Evelyn's father arrived at Blackthornne Manor. He looked older than she remembered, more fragile, like the weight of everything had finally broken through his usual detachment. "I came to apologize," he said without preamble. "For what?" "For all of it. The debts, the pressure, the fact that you're standing here preparing to commit perjury because I couldn't manage money like a responsible adult." He sat heavily. "This is my fault. It's Pemberton's fault. He's the one suing. Because you refused him, which you only had the freedom to do because the Duke paid my debts, which means I'm still at the root of this disaster." Richard looked up at her. "Are you really going to marry him, or is this just for the case?" "I don't know yet." "That's honest, at least. It's all I have." Her father was quiet for a moment. "Your mother thinks you're making a terrible mistake. She thinks the Duke is using you." "What do you think?" "I think—" He stopped, choosing his words carefully. "I think that when I was your age, I made every decision based on what was safe, what was expected, what wouldn't cause problems. And I ended up with a life I didn't want, married to a woman I loved but couldn't protect, drowning in debts I couldn't pay. You're doing the opposite. You're choosing risk over safety. And it terrifies me because I know how badly it can go wrong. But it also—" His voice cracked slightly. "It also makes me proud, because at least you're choosing something. At least you're trying." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm scared." "Good. Fear means you understand the stakes. Just don't let it paralyze you." "What if we lose the case?" "Then we lose. But at least you'll have fought. At least you'll know you didn't just accept defeat." They sat together in silence, father and daughter, both terrified, both trying to be brave. The hearing began at 10 o'clock on a gray morning that felt appropriate for the occasion. The courtroom was packed, exactly what Lord Pemberton had wanted. Evelyn could see him across the aisle, looking smug and certain, flanked by 3 lawyers who probably cost more than her family's estate was worth. His supporters filled the gallery, whispering behind hands, watching her with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. Adrian sat beside her, perfectly composed in formal attire, the emerald ring visible on her finger. "Ready?" he murmured. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." The judge entered, an elderly man with white hair and a severe expression. He took his seat, surveyed the packed courtroom with obvious distaste, and called the proceedings to order. Pemberton's lead counsel stood immediately. "Your Honor, we are here to address a clear case of breach of promise. Lord Pemberton made a formal proposal of marriage to Miss Evelyn Harrow on the evening of October 3rd. She accepted verbally in the presence of witnesses, and then publicly refused him 3 days later at a social gathering, causing significant damage to his reputation and standing." "Miss Harrow's counsel?" the judge said. Mrs. Hartwell stood. "Your Honor, Miss Harrow could not have accepted Lord Pemberton's proposal, as she was already engaged to another man at the time the proposal was made." The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge banged his gavel. "Order, continue." Miss Harrow became engaged to His Grace, the Duke of Blackthornne, in September of this year. The engagement was kept private due to financial complications with Miss Harrow's family, but it existed nonetheless. Lord Pemberton's proposal was therefore inappropriate and unwanted, and his suit is without merit. Pemberton's lawyer looked like he'd been slapped. "That's preposterous." "There was no public announcement. Because it was private, that doesn't make it invalid. It makes it convenient, fabricated to avoid responsibility." "Then I suppose we'll have to prove it's real." The judge looked between them. "Do you have evidence of this engagement?" "We do, Your Honor. Letters, witness testimony, and this." Mrs. Hartwell gestured to Evelyn's hand. "The Blackthornne family emerald, given to Miss Harrow when she accepted the Duke's proposal in September." The judge leaned forward. "Approach." Evelyn stood on shaking legs, walking to the bench with Mrs. Hartwell. The judge examined the ring closely, then consulted with the clerk who'd brought forward what looked like estate records. "This ring is documented," he said finally. 3 generations of Blackthornne women wore it. If the Duke gave it to Miss Harrow, that's significant. "It proves nothing about when it was given," Pemberton's lawyer argued. Which is why we have the letters, Mrs. Hartwell said smoothly. 15 pieces of correspondence between His Grace and Miss Harrow, spanning June through September, documenting the progression of their relationship, culminating in an engagement. May I see them? The letters were presented. The judge read them slowly, his expression unreadable. The courtroom held its breath. Finally, he looked up. These appear authentic. The paper, the ink, the handwriting, all consistent with the dates claimed. They could still be fabricated, Pemberton's counsel insisted. They could be, but without evidence of fabrication, I have to accept them as presented. The judge returned the letters. I'll allow testimony from both parties. We'll hear Lord Pemberton's account first, then Miss Harrow's. The court will determine the truth based on the evidence and witness credibility. Pemberton took the stand looking confident. He described his proposal, formal, proper, everything a proposal should be, described Evelyn's response, which he characterized as acceptance, described his shock and humiliation when she refused him publicly. Did Miss Harrow ever mention being engaged to another man? His lawyer asked. Never. Did she ever give you reason to believe your suit was unwelcome? No, she encouraged it through her attention and company. It was masterfully done, painting Evelyn as a manipulative social climber who'd used him for status before discarding him for better prospects. Then it was Evelyn's turn. She walked to the stand feeling like she was walking to her own execution. Every eye in the courtroom was on her. Every whisper was about her. This was it. The moment where she either saved herself or destroyed everything. Mrs. Hartwell began gently. Miss Harrow, when did you first meet the Duke of Blackthornne? In June, at his aunt's garden party. And when did your relationship progress beyond acquaintance? We began corresponding shortly after. By August, I realized I had feelings for him. When did he propose? September 12th, in a letter. And you accepted? Yes. Why keep the engagement private? Because, Evelyn took a breath, because my family was in financial difficulty. I didn't want people to think I was marrying the Duke to solve those problems. I wanted to wait until the situation was resolved. Which it was. When? 3 weeks ago, the Duke settled my father's debts. And then Lord Pemberton proposed? Yes, but I told him I was already engaged. Did you? This was the dangerous part, the part where she had to lie convincingly under oath. Yes, during our private meeting in the library. He asked me to marry him, and I told him I couldn't because I was already promised to someone else. And his response? He didn't believe me. He thought I was making excuses. Pemberton's lawyer stood for cross-examination, and Evelyn felt her heart rate spike. Miss Harrow, you claim you told Lord Pemberton about your engagement, yet he has no recollection of this conversation. That's not my fault. Convenient, though, that the one piece of evidence that would support your story is your word against his, I suppose. These letters you've presented, how do we know they're real? You can verify the paper, the ink, the handwriting, all of which can be artificially aged. How do we know you didn't write these last week to create a false paper trail? Why would I do that? To escape responsibility for your actions, to avoid paying damages to a man you wronged. I didn't wrong him. I refused an unwanted proposal after leading him to believe you were available. I never led him to believe anything. He assumed. Did you or did you not spend time in his company, accept his invitations, allow him to court you? I was polite to a family acquaintance. That's not the same as encouraging a proposal. But you didn't discourage it either, did you? Not until the Duke's money solved your family's problems and you had a better option. That's not... You saw an opportunity to trade up, from a wealthy lord to a duke, and when Lord Pemberton stood in your way, you fabricated an engagement to avoid consequences. No. Evelyn's hands were shaking. I refused Lord Pemberton because I was already engaged to someone else. She caught Adrian's eyes across the courtroom. Someone I'm still engaged to. Someone I'm planning to marry. The words hung in the air. Pemberton's lawyer smiled. Planning to marry. Present tense. So the engagement hasn't been formalized yet. We're waiting for an appropriate time to announce waiting, just like you were waiting in September. How long does one engagement require before it becomes legitimate? As long as we decide it requires. Convenient. And if this engagement happens to fall apart after this case is decided, well, you'll have gotten what you wanted. Avoided paying damages. Escaped responsibility. That's not going to happen. How can you be certain? Because I love him. The words came out before she could stop them, raw and unplanned and completely true. The courtroom went silent. Pemberton's lawyer recovered quickly. Love, how romantic. Tell me, Miss Harrow, when exactly did you fall in love with the Duke? She couldn't answer. Couldn't pinpoint the moment when fear had shifted to trust, when curiosity had become something deeper. You hesitate. Because it's not a simple question. Love doesn't happen in a single moment. Doesn't it? You claim to have fallen in love over the course of a summer, through letters and stolen moments. But you can't tell me when it happened? I'm telling you it wasn't one moment. It was realizing he saw me. Not what I could give him, not what I represented socially, but me. And that he gave me choices instead of demands. And that being with him felt like I could finally breathe. She was crying now, didn't care. This wasn't about winning anymore. This was about truth. Messy, complicated, terrifying truth. I don't know if that's love, she continued. Maybe it is. Maybe it's something else. But it's real. And it's why I refused Lord Pemberton. Not because of money or status or any other calculation. Because I'd already chosen someone else. The silence that followed felt infinite. Then Adrian stood. Your Honor, I'd like to testify. That's irregular, Pemberton's lawyer began. I don't care. Adrian moved to the stand, completely composed. You want to know if the engagement is real? Ask me. I'll tell you exactly how real it is. The judge considered. Proceed. Adrian was sworn in, and Mrs. Hartwell asked the obvious question. Your Grace, are you engaged to marry Miss Evelyn Harrow? Yes? When did you propose? September 12th, in a letter. Why propose in a letter rather than in person? Because she was at her father's estate and I was here, and because I'm better with written words than spoken ones when it comes to things that matter. When do you intend to marry? Adrian looked directly at Evelyn. As soon as she'll have me. Pemberton's lawyer stood. Your Grace, you're a duke. You could marry anyone. Why Miss Harrow? Because she's the only person I've met who sees through the title to who I actually am. Because she's brave enough to be honest, even when honesty costs her. Because when I'm with her, I remember what it feels like to want something more than duty. That's very poetic. Also very convenient, given the timing. There's nothing convenient about this. If I'd wanted convenient, I would have let her marry you and gone back to my comfortable, empty life. Instead, I'm here, defending our right to choose each other despite every social pressure telling us not to. And if the engagement fails, it won't. You can't guarantee that. No, but I can guarantee I'll fight for it. Which is more than I can say for a man who's suing someone for the crime of refusing to love him. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly. Order! We will have order! When the room finally quieted, he looked between Pemberton and Adrian with obvious distaste. I've heard enough, he said. Here's what I see. A man proposing to a woman he barely knew without confirming her availability. A woman who claimed she was already engaged, with evidence, flawed perhaps, but present, supporting that claim. And two people who are either deeply in love or committing very convincing fraud. He paused. But fraud requires proof. And Lord Pemberton has provided none. His case rests entirely on assumptions and injured pride. Your Honor, Pemberton's lawyer tried. I'm not finished. Miss Harrow has presented letters, witness testimony, and physical evidence of an engagement. Unless you can prove these are fabricated, definitively prove it, I have no choice but to accept them as authentic. He looked at Pemberton. Your suit is dismissed. The gavel came down. Evelyn couldn't breathe. They'd won. They'd actually won. The courtroom descended into chaos, people shouting, arguing, demanding explanations. But Evelyn heard none of it. She was staring at Adrian, who was staring back, and between them hung the question neither had answered. What now? Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Crowds had gathered. Everyone wanted a statement, a reaction, confirmation or denial of the rumors flying through London. Adrian took Evelyn's hand. "We should go." "Wait." She turned to face the crowd, to face the cameras and notebooks and hungry eyes. "I want to say something. Evelyn, no. I need to say this." She raised her voice. "You all want to know if the engagement is real. If I really refused Lord Pemberton because I was already promised to someone else. Here's your answer. Yes. The engagement is real. The Duke and I are getting married." Adrian's hand tightened on hers. "And before anyone asks," she continued, "no, it's not about money. It's not about status. It's about choosing the life I want instead of accepting the life I'm told I should have. It's about two people who found each other despite every reason they shouldn't fit and decided to try anyway." She looked at Adrian. "So yes, we're engaged, and yes, we're getting married, and if that makes me scandalous or improper or whatever other label you want to apply, fine. I'd rather be scandalous and happy than respectable and miserable." She turned and walked away, Adrian beside her, leaving the chaos behind. In the carriage, they sat in silence for a long time. "You just proposed to me in front of half of London," Adrian said finally. "You proposed first, in September, remember? That was a letter we fabricated for a court case. And what you said on the stand about wanting to marry me as soon as I'll have you, was that fabricated too? No. Then I guess we're engaged, for real this time." Adrian laughed, and it sounded like relief and terror and joy all mixed together. "This is insane. Completely. We barely know each other. We've committed fraud together. That has to count for something. Evelyn." He took her hand, the emerald ring catching the light. "Are you sure? Really sure? Because once we do this, once we make this official, there's no going back." She thought about the past weeks, the fear, the choices, the slow realization that freedom wasn't about avoiding risk, but about choosing which risks were worth taking. "I'm sure," she said. "Terrified, but sure. You?" "Same." They looked at each other, two people who'd started as strangers and somewhere along the way had become something more, something neither of them could quite name yet, but both were willing to discover. "So when do we actually get married?" Evelyn asked. "Whenever you want." "Tomorrow?" Adrian blinked. "Tomorrow? Why wait? We've already told everyone we're doing it. Might as well make it real before they have time to question anything. That's either brilliant or completely mad. Probably both. But I'm tired of waiting for the right moment. This is the moment. Let's take it." And for the first time since this entire mess began, Adrian smiled, really smiled, the kind that transformed his whole face. "Tomorrow then," he said. "Let's get married tomorrow." Tomorrow turned out to be more complicated than either of them anticipated. For starters, Evelyn's mother refused to speak to her. Margaret had taken one look at them returning from the courthouse, seen the determination on both their faces, and locked herself in a room with instructions not to be disturbed. Her father was more pragmatic, but no less concerned. "You're getting married tomorrow," Richard said, not quite a question. "Yes," Evelyn confirmed. "To a man you've known 3 weeks. Technically, we've known each other since June, according to our legal testimony." Her father didn't smile. "This isn't a joke, Evelyn. Marriage is permanent. So is losing a court case and being financially destroyed. I chose this option." "Did you? Or did circumstances choose it for you?" It was the question Evelyn had been avoiding since she'd made the announcement. Had she really chosen Adrian? Or had she just backed herself into a corner where marriage was the only way out? "Does it matter?" she asked. "Yes. It matters whether you're marrying someone you love or someone who's convenient. He's not convenient. Convenient would have been Lord Pemberton with his money and his disinterest and his promise to leave me alone. Adrian is—" She struggled for words. "He's complicated and challenging, and he makes me think about things I'd rather avoid. He's the opposite of convenient. That's not the same as love. Maybe not. But it's something, and right now, something feels like enough." Her father looked at her for a long moment. "Your mother thinks you're making the worst mistake of your life." "What do you think?" "I think you're terrified. I think you're doing something impulsive and possibly reckless. I also think—" He paused. I think you're braver than I ever was, and I'm proud of you for that, even if I'm also worried. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Will you walk me down the aisle, even if it's tomorrow, and rushed and possibly insane? Of course. You're my daughter. That doesn't change. The ceremony was planned for the following afternoon in the chapel at Blackthornne Manor. Small, private, with only immediate family and essential witnesses. No grand celebration, no elaborate dress, no time for second thoughts. Evelyn spent the morning in a strange haze of activity and panic. There was a dress to alter, one of Adrian's mother's old gowns pulled from storage and hastily modified, papers to sign. A minister to brief on the situation without revealing too much. Mrs. Hartwell insisted on being present as a legal witness, just in case Pemberton tried any last-minute maneuvers. He won't take this well, the barrister warned. Losing the case was bad enough. Having you immediately marry the Duke will be salt in the wound. Good, Evelyn said, then felt petty for saying it. I'm serious. Watch for retaliation. Men like Pemberton don't accept defeat gracefully. But there was no time to worry about Pemberton's wounded pride. There was only the relentless march toward afternoon, toward the chapel, toward a decision that felt both inevitable and impossible. At 1 o'clock, her mother finally emerged from her room. I'm not here to bless this, Margaret said immediately. I still think it's a mistake. Then why are you here? Because you're my daughter. And because, her voice cracked slightly, because I spent 30 years in a marriage I chose for practical reasons, and I won't miss seeing you choose differently, even if I think you're wrong. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was presence. Evelyn would take it. The dress fit better than expected, ivory silk with delicate embroidery, slightly old-fashioned but beautiful. Looking at herself in the mirror, Evelyn felt like she was wearing someone else's life. Some other woman who knew what she was doing, who was certain about her choices, who wasn't terrified that she'd just made a spectacular mistake. You look beautiful, her mother said quietly. I look like I'm playing dress-up. All brides feel that way. Did you? Margaret was silent for a moment. Yes. I felt like I was pretending to be someone's wife, and any moment they'd realize I had no idea what I was doing. She adjusted the veil. 30 years later, I still feel that way sometimes. That's not reassuring. It's honest, which is more than most people will give you. Her mother met her eyes in the mirror. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. That's either very brave or very stupid. Everyone keeps saying that because it's true. Margaret turned her around, studying her face. Do you love him? Evelyn thought about Adrian's gray eyes, his careful questions, the way he'd given her space to choose even when it cost him. She thought about the past 3 weeks, the confrontations, the revelations, the slow unraveling of every assumption she'd made about what her life was supposed to look like. I don't know, she said honestly, but I want to find out, and that's more than I had with Lord Pemberton. That's not a high bar. No, but it's mine. At 2 o'clock, Evelyn stood outside the chapel doors with her father, listening to the quiet murmur of voices inside. So few people. So little ceremony. Nothing like the grand wedding she'd imagined as a girl, back when she still believed in fairy tales. Last chance to run, Richard said. You're supposed to be supportive. I am. That's why I'm offering the option. He squeezed her hand. But if you go through those doors, I need you to be certain. Not certain this will work. No one can be certain of that. Certain you're choosing it for the right reasons. What are the right reasons? That's something only you can answer. The doors opened. The chapel was small, intimate, with afternoon light streaming through stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the floor. Adrian stood at the altar looking slightly pale but composed, wearing formal attire that made him look every inch the Duke he was. Mrs. Hartwell sat in the front row, next to Lady Beatrice, who'd arrived that morning with mixed expressions of concern and curiosity. Evelyn's mother was already seated, handkerchief in hand. Evelyn walked down the aisle, feeling like she was moving through water, everything slightly unreal. This was happening. This was actually happening. Adrian's eyes met hers, and something in his expression steadied her. He looked as terrified as she felt, which was oddly comforting. At least they were both uncertain together. The minister began speaking, standard words about marriage and commitment and joining lives. Evelyn heard it all from a distance. Her attention focused on Adrian's face, on the slight tremor in his hands, on the way he was looking at her like she was something precious and fragile. Do you, Adrian James Blackthornne, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? So, I do. Do you, Evelyn Margaret Harrow, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? This was it. The moment where she could still back out, could still claim this was all too fast, too uncertain, too much. The moment where safe and sorry were still an option. Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been 3 weeks ago, resigned, trapped, slowly dying by degrees while telling herself it was fine. She thought about Lord Pemberton's clinical proposal, about her mother's warnings, about all the voices telling her to be practical, be smart, be anything except brave. Then she thought about Adrian asking her what she wanted, about him giving her choices instead of demands, about the terrifying, exhilarating freedom of not knowing how this would end but choosing it anyway. I do, she said. The minister pronounced them married, and Adrian kissed her, brief, formal, appropriate for the audience. But there was something in it that felt like a promise, like a question, like the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. They signed the papers. Mrs. Hartwell witnessed with obvious satisfaction. Lady Beatrice dabbed at her eyes. Evelyn's mother looked like she couldn't decide whether to cry or object. And just like that, Evelyn Harrow became Evelyn Blackthornne. The wedding breakfast was awkward. Small talk that felt forced, congratulations that sounded uncertain, an undercurrent of tension nobody wanted to acknowledge. Evelyn caught her mother watching her with an expression that might have been worry or grief or both. "You're married," Margaret said when they had a moment alone. "Yes." "Oh, to a duke you've known 3 weeks." "Yes." "I don't understand you anymore. I'm not sure I understand me either." Evelyn took her mother's hand. "But I'm trying to figure it out. That has to count for something." Margaret's eyes glistened. "I just don't want you to get hurt." "I know, but I think I'd rather risk getting hurt than guarantee feeling nothing. When did you become so brave?" "I'm not brave. I'm terrified. I'm just doing it anyway." Her mother pulled her into an unexpected hug. "Then I suppose that's what bravery is." By evening, most of the guests had departed. Lady Beatrice returned to London with promises to host a proper reception once society had time to adjust to the news. Mrs. Hartwell left with instructions to contact her immediately if Pemberton tried anything else. Evelyn's parents were staying one more night before returning to their estate, which left Evelyn and Adrian alone in the manor that was now, technically, her home. They stood in the drawing room, newly married and completely uncertain what happened next. "So," Adrian said finally. "So, we're married, apparently." That's quite something." Evelyn laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. "We committed fraud, won a lawsuit, and got married in 24 hours. I think quite something might be an understatement." "Fair point." Adrian moved to the window, looking out at the darkening gardens. "I should probably tell you that I have no idea what I'm doing. That makes 2 of us. I've never been married before. Well, I almost was. But Caroline died before—" He stopped. "Sorry, that's probably not appropriate wedding night conversation." "It's fine, I know about her. I loved her, very much. And when she died, I convinced myself I'd never feel that way about anyone again. That it was safer to just exist. Go through the motions. Fulfill obligations without actually engaging with anything." "What changed?" Adrian turned to look at her. "You did. You showed up angry and resigned and determined to make the worst possible choice for all the wrong reasons, and it made me furious. Because I saw myself in you, saw what I'd become, someone who'd chosen safety over living, and I couldn't watch you do the same thing." "So you interfered." "So I interfered, probably overstepped in about a dozen ways, made grand gestures and paid debts, and generally tried to control a situation that wasn't mine to control. And now we're married." "And now we're married," he smiled slightly, "which I think means we need to figure out what kind of marriage this is going to be." Evelyn felt her heart rate pick up. What do you mean? I mean, Adrian chose his words carefully. We got married to win a court case. To prove the engagement was real, to protect your reputation, to beat Pemberton. Those were all valid reasons. But they're not the same as wanting to be married. Are you saying you don't want to be married? No, I'm saying I don't know what you want, and I won't trap you in something you agreed to out of necessity rather than desire. The words hung between them, honest and terrifying. Evelyn thought about the easy answer, the one that would smooth things over, that would make this less complicated. She could say of course she wanted to be married, that this was exactly what she'd chosen, that she had no doubts. But Adrian had asked for honesty, and she owed him that. I don't know what I want, she said finally. 3 weeks ago, I wanted security and safety and a marriage that required nothing from me. Then you came along and made me want more, and I still don't know what more looks like. I don't know if I love you. I don't know if what I feel is real or just gratitude and fear and the relief of not being alone. That's honest. Is it enough? Adrian crossed the room, stopping close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. Can I tell you what I want? Yes. I want time. Time to figure out what this is without the pressure of lawsuits or society or anyone else's expectations. Time to learn who you are when you're not performing survival. Time to see if what we have is real or just two people who found each other in crisis. How much time? As much as we need. Months, years, whatever it takes. We're already married. We are. Which means we have the luxury of figuring this out without deadlines. He took her hand, the emerald ring cool against her skin. I'm proposing a deal. We stay married. We live in the same house. We get to know each other, really know each other, without pretense or pressure. And at the end of whatever time we need, we decide if we want to stay married or if we want something different. You'd agree to an annulment if I wanted one? If that's what you chose, yes. That's not how marriage works. Maybe not. But I won't trap you in something you don't want. That defeats the entire purpose of giving you freedom. Evelyn studied his face, looking for dishonesty or manipulation or hidden agendas, found only sincerity and fear, and a hope that mirrored her own. What if I fall in love with you and you don't feel the same? She asked. What if I'm already in love with you and you never feel the same? Then we both take the risk. Exactly. It was the most unconventional marriage arrangement she'd ever heard of. It was also, somehow, the most honest. Okay, she said. Time. We'll take time and see what happens. No expectations? None, except honesty. I can do honesty. Then we have a deal. Adrian smiled and it transformed his face, made him look younger, less guarded. We're terrible at being conventional, aren't we? Completely terrible. I think that might be my favorite thing about us. The first weeks of marriage were stranger than Evelyn had anticipated. They lived in the same house but maintained separate rooms, ate meals together, walked the grounds, spent evenings in the library discussing everything from politics to books to completely trivial nonsense. They were learning each other in increments. Adrian's habit of reading the same passage 3 times when he was thinking, Evelyn's tendency to pace when anxious, the way they both preferred silence over meaningless chatter. It felt like courtship in reverse, getting to know someone after already committing to them, discovering whether the person you'd married was someone you actually liked. Tell me something true, Adrian said one evening as they sat by the fire. What kind of something? Anything. Something I don't know. Something real. Evelyn thought about it. I hate embroidery. Everyone says ladies should enjoy needlework, and I spent years pretending I did, but I actually hate it. It's tedious, and my hands cramp, and I'd rather do almost anything else. Adrian laughed. That's what you're sharing? Your hatred of embroidery? You said something true. That's true. Fair enough. My turn. I can't stand opera. Everyone expects dukes to love opera, so I go and pretend to be moved by it, but mostly I'm just bored, and my seat is uncomfortable, and I'm counting down until intermission. That's terrible. Opera is supposed to be cultured. So is embroidery. They looked at each other and burst out laughing, the kind of genuine amusement that felt like discovery. What else? Evelyn asked. What else do you pretend to like? Poetry. Or at least most poetry. There are a few poets I genuinely enjoy, but the rest is just words arranged pretentiously. I pretend to care about fashion, and genealogy, and who's related to whom in the peerage. I pretend to enjoy hunting. I pretend to enjoy dinner parties. I pretend half my life is interesting when mostly it's just obligation and paperwork. I pretended for years that I was fine with marrying Lord Pemberton. The confession slipped out before she could stop it. The laughter died. I know, Adrian said quietly. Do you? Because sometimes I wonder if you actually understand how terrified I was, how trapped I felt, how close I came to going through with it just because I didn't know there was another option. I understand more than you think. How? You're a duke. You have money and power and choices. How could you possibly understand being trapped? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. After Caroline died, I was trapped too. Different circumstances, but trapped nonetheless. Trapped by grief, by guilt, by the assumption that I'd had my chance at happiness and lost it. I went through the motions for years, attending events, managing the estate, doing everything a duke is supposed to do, while feeling completely hollow inside. What changed? You did. Watching you fight so hard to convince yourself you were fine when you clearly weren't, it was like looking in a mirror, and I realized I'd been doing the same thing. Telling myself I was fine, that existing was enough, that I didn't need or deserve anything more. He looked at her. You made me want more, made me remember what it felt like to care about something beyond just surviving each day. That's a lot of pressure to put on a person you barely knew. I know, which is why I'm not putting it on you now. I'm just grateful you existed, that you stumbled into my life and disrupted everything. Even if this doesn't work out the way either of us hopes, I'm grateful for that. Evelyn felt something shift in her chest. Not love, not yet, but something adjacent to it. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that this person sitting across from her had seen her at her worst and chosen her anyway. I'm grateful too, she said. Even though you're incredibly irritating. I'm irritating? You ask too many questions. You push when I want to retreat. You make me think about uncomfortable things. You're welcome. She threw a cushion at him. News of the marriage spread through society like wildfire, and the reactions were exactly as divided as expected. Some saw it as romantic, a whirlwind courtship, true love conquering all obstacles. Others saw it as scandalous, a desperate woman ensnaring a duke, a rushed marriage to avoid consequences. Lord Pemberton, predictably, was in the latter camp. The letter arrived 6 weeks after the wedding, delivered by a grim-faced courier. Adrian read it first, his expression darkening with each line. What is it? Evelyn asked. He's published a pamphlet about the case, about us, about... Adrian handed her the letter. Read it yourself. The pamphlet was titled A Cautionary Tale, How a Scheming Woman Manipulates the Law and Ensnares a Duke. It laid out Pemberton's version of events, Evelyn as a calculating social climber, Adrian as a fool blinded by beauty, their engagement as an obvious fabrication to escape justice. This is slander, Evelyn said, hands shaking. It's also protected speech. He's careful not to make any claims that could be legally challenged, just insinuations and character assassination. So we can't do anything? We could respond, publish our own account, defend ourselves publicly, and give it more attention, make it a bigger scandal? Adrian was quiet. What do you want to do? Evelyn thought about it. Thought about the woman she'd been 2 months ago, who would have panicked at this, who would have seen it as proof that choosing herself had been a mistake. That woman would have wanted to hide, to defend, to make it all go away. But she wasn't that woman anymore. Nothing, she said. Nothing? We do nothing. We don't respond, don't acknowledge it, don't give him the satisfaction of knowing it bothered us. We live our lives and let people make up their own minds about what's true. That's bold. That's the only option I can live with. I'm done defending my choices to people who've already decided I'm wrong. She met Adrian's eyes. Are you okay with that? With people believing the worst about you? I've spent my entire life worrying about what people believe about me. I think I'm ready to try something different. So they did nothing. The pamphlet circulated, society gossiped, people took sides. And Evelyn and Adrian simply continued living, walking the grounds, discussing books, slowly building something that felt like partnership. Not everyone was supportive. Evelyn's mother still worried, still questioned, still couldn't quite believe this arrangement would last. Some of Adrian's social circle distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the scandal, but others surprised them. Lady Beatrice showed up unannounced one afternoon, marching into the drawing room with her usual imperious air. "I've read the pamphlet," she announced. "Of course you have," Adrian said, "and I've decided it's complete rubbish." Both Adrian and Evelyn stared. "You have?" Evelyn said carefully. "Oh, don't look so shocked. I'm not blind. I saw how you two were at the house party, circling each other like nervous cats, both terrified of admitting you cared. And I saw the way you defended her in court, Adrian, the way you looked at her." She sat down, arranged her skirts. "That's not manipulation. That's two people who are absolutely terrible at admitting they want each other." "We're married now," Adrian pointed out. "Yes, in the most unconventional way possible, which is why I believe you." She looked at Evelyn. "Calculating social climbers don't marry dukes and then maintain separate bedrooms. They don't negotiate for time and space and independence. They secure the position and exploit it. You're doing the opposite." "Thank you," Evelyn said, not quite sure if it was a compliment. "It is a compliment, a backhanded one, but still." Lady Beatrice stood. "I'm hosting a dinner party next month. You'll both attend. And you'll hold your heads high and ignore anyone who questions your marriage. Because the best response to scandal is living well despite it." She left in a swirl of expensive fabric, and Evelyn looked at Adrian in bewilderment. "Did your aunt just defend us?" "I think she did." "I thought she disapproved." "She did. She also apparently changed her mind. Aunt Beatrice is unpredictable that way." More surprises came. Richard Harrow visited and actually apologized, a real apology, without excuses or deflection. "I put you in an impossible position," he said to Evelyn, "and I'm sorry. You shouldn't have had to choose between your happiness and your family's security. You were desperate. That's not an excuse. I should have found another way, should have been braver." He looked at Adrian. "Thank you for giving my daughter choices I couldn't provide." "She gave herself those choices," Adrian said. "I just removed some obstacles." The conversation was awkward but genuine, and when her father left, Evelyn felt like something had shifted between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. Even her mother slowly came around. 3 months after the wedding, Margaret visited and found Evelyn in the library, curled up with a book. "You look happy," she said, like she was surprised. "Do I?" "Yes. Not the performance of happiness. Actually, happy." Evelyn set down her book. "I think I might be. It's strange." "Strange how?" "I spent so long thinking happiness was something I couldn't afford, that it was frivolous or impractical or just not for people like me. But it turns out it wasn't about affording it. It was about allowing myself to want it." Margaret sat down beside her. "I was wrong about him." "Adrian?" "I thought he was using you. Thought this whole marriage was some elaborate manipulation. But watching you these past months, the way you are together," she shook her head. "You're equals, partners. That's rare. We're still figuring it out. That's what marriage is, 30 years in, and I'm still figuring it out with your father." She took Evelyn's hand. "I'm sorry I tried to stop you. Sorry I couldn't see what you were choosing. You were trying to protect me. I was trying to protect the person I thought you were. Turns out you're someone different, someone braver." Sick. It was the closest thing to a blessing Evelyn was going to get, and she'd take it. 6 months into their marriage, Evelyn and Adrian were in the garden when she finally asked the question that had been building for weeks. "Do you think we made a mistake?" Adrian looked up from the rosebush he'd been examining. "What? Getting married, doing this. Do you think it was a mistake? Do you?" "I asked first." He set down his pruning shears, turning to face her fully. "No, I don't think it was a mistake. Unconventional? Yes. Rushed, definitely. But a mistake? No." Even though we still don't know what we're doing, especially because we don't know what we're doing. If we knew exactly how this would turn out, it wouldn't be worth doing. That doesn't make sense, doesn't it? Knowing the end before you begin means you're just going through motions. Not knowing means you're actually living, taking risks, seeing what happens. Evelyn thought about that. I used to think not knowing was terrifying. And now? Now it's still terrifying, but also, she struggled for words, also kind of exhilarating. Like I'm writing my own story instead of just reading one someone else wrote for me. Adrian smiled. How's your story going so far? Better than expected, worse than imagined, somewhere in between perfect and disaster. That's a pretty good place to be. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon sun paint everything gold. Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, resigned, trapped, slowly suffocating under the weight of other people's expectations. That woman felt like a stranger now. I think I'm falling in love with you, she said abruptly. Adrian went very still. You think? I don't know what love is supposed to feel like, but when I imagine my life without you in it, something hurts. And when I see you across a room, I feel, she gestured helplessly. I feel like I can breathe properly, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. That sounds like love to me. Does it sound like it to you? Because if you don't feel the same way, this is going to be really awkward. Adrian laughed, and it was genuine and unguarded. Evelyn, I've been in love with you since you told me to mind my own business about your fish at dinner. I just didn't want to pressure you into feeling something you weren't ready to feel. So you've just been, what, waiting patiently while I figured it out? Yes. That's insane. Probably. But I wanted you to be sure. I wanted this to be your choice. Evelyn felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been locked tight for years, buried under fear and practicality and the assumption that she wasn't allowed to want more than survival. I choose this, she said. I choose you. Not because I have to. Not because it's practical or safe or any other reason except I want to. I want to see where this goes. I want to build a life with you. I want... Her voice caught. I want to be happy, and you make me happy. Even though I'm irritating? Especially because you're irritating. Adrian pulled her close, and when he kissed her this time, it wasn't formal or appropriate or performed for an audience. It was real, messy and imperfect, and exactly what she'd been too afraid to want. So what happens now? She asked when they broke apart. Now we keep figuring it out, keep choosing each other, keep building something that's ours instead of what anyone else expects. No more separate bedrooms? Only if you want to maintain them. I don't. Then we won't. It was that simple, that complicated, that terrifying and exhilarating, and exactly what Evelyn had been looking for without knowing she was looking for it. A year after the wedding, Evelyn hosted a dinner party at Blackthornne Manor. Not because she had to, not because society expected it, but because she wanted to. Because she'd discovered she actually enjoyed bringing people together when it was on her own terms, when she could choose the guests and the conversation and create something genuine instead of performing obligation. Her parents were there. Adrian's aunt, Mrs. Hartwell. A few friends they'd made over the past year, people who didn't care about scandal, who saw them as people rather than gossip fodder. This is nice, Adrian said quietly as they watched their guests mingle. It is, isn't it? You're good at this. At what? Creating spaces where people feel comfortable, where they can be themselves instead of performing for each other. Evelyn thought about that. I spent so long performing that I forgot what being myself felt like. Now I'm just trying to create the kind of space I wish I'd had, where people can choose to be honest. You're remarkable. I'm really not. You are. You took a disaster of a situation and turned it into something beautiful. You changed the rules instead of just accepting them. We changed them. Together. Adrian took her hand, the emerald ring catching the candlelight. Do you regret any of it? The lawsuit, the rushed wedding, any of it? Evelyn thought about the past year, the struggles, the uncertainty, the slow building of trust and partnership. Thought about the woman she'd been, resigned to a life of managed misery, and the woman she'd become, someone who made her own choices and lived with the consequences. "No," she said. "I don't regret any of it. It was messy and imperfect and sometimes terrifying, but it was mine. We made it ours." Past tense, present tense. We're still making it. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the house had settled into quiet, Evelyn stood at her bedroom window looking out at the grounds. Their bedroom now, not hers or his, but theirs. One of 100 small changes that had accumulated over the past year, building something that felt like home. Adrian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different my life is from what I imagined it would be." "Good different or bad different?" "Just different. A year ago I was planning to marry Lord Pemberton, planning to spend the rest of my life pretending I was fine while slowly dying inside. And now," she turned to face him, "now I'm married to someone I actually love, living in a house that feels like home, figuring out what I want instead of just accepting what I'm told I should want. It's strange. Strange good? Strange wonderful, strange terrifying, strange exactly right. That's a lot of stranges. It's a strange life." Adrian smiled. "Want to keep making it stranger? What did you have in mind?" "I don't know. That's the point. We could do anything. Travel, start a project, have completely impractical dinner parties every week. Whatever we want." "Whatever we want," Evelyn repeated, testing the words. A year ago, those words would have felt impossible. Now they felt like possibility. "So what do you want?" Adrian asked. Evelyn thought about it, really thought about it, without fear or calculation or concern for what she should want. "I want this," she said finally. "Not this moment specifically, though this moment is pretty good, but this, the freedom to choose, the partnership, the sense that my life is mine instead of something being done to me. I want to keep building this, with you. That's all. That's everything." And it was. Not perfect. Nothing ever was. They still fought sometimes, still struggled with uncertainty, still had moments of doubt and fear. But they were fighting and struggling and doubting together, as partners, as equals, as two people who'd chosen each other and kept choosing each other every day. The scandal faded eventually, the way scandals do. New gossip replaced old. People found other things to whisper about. A few years later, when someone mentioned the Blackthornne marriage at a society gathering, the response was vague approval rather than shock. They'd become respectable through the simple act of living well, of refusing to be ashamed of the choices they'd made. Evelyn never forgot what it felt like to be trapped, to believe she had no options, to resign herself to misery because she thought that's what survival required. She made sure other women knew they had choices, quietly funding education initiatives, supporting women who needed help escaping bad situations, using her position as a duchess to create space for women to be more than just decorative or convenient. "You're changing things," Adrian said one evening, reading a letter from one of the programs she supported. "Trying to, slowly. That's how real change happens. Slowly. One person at a time. Is that too idealistic? No, it's exactly idealistic enough." Years later, when people asked about their marriage, how they'd made it work despite the scandal, despite the rush beginning, despite everything working against them, Evelyn's answer was always the same. "We chose each other, and then we kept choosing each other." That's all marriage is, really. The daily choice to stay, to try, to build something together instead of just existing side by side. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense. No grand declarations, no perfect moments, no fairy tale ending where everything fell into place. But it was real, messy and complicated and imperfect, and exactly what both of them needed. Evelyn had started out trying to survive. She'd ended up learning to live, and in a world that told women they had to choose between security and happiness, between practicality and passion, between being smart and being brave, she'd proven you could choose something else entirely. You could choose yourself. You could choose partnership. You could choose uncertainty over safety, risk over resignation, possibility over the slow death of accepting less than you deserved. It wasn't easy. It was never easy. But it was worth it. And standing in her home, with her partner, building a life that was entirely hers, Evelyn knew she'd made the right choice. Not the safe choice. Not the expected choice. but the right one, her choice, and that made all the difference.